welcome to the program. It is July 21st, 2026. And here we are. Once again, it's the Jeff Gerstmann Show. That's right. It is, the summer's almost over. I don't know if you know this, but the summer ends sometime in early August now. Kids go back to school super early. It's really strange. I don't understand how this is supposed to work, but it seems like kids are getting a raw deal when it comes to summer break from school these days. But hey, we're here making things happen about video games. I have been making things happen with the Steam machine. We talked about it a lot last week, but to just kind of check in on the power of the Steam machine. It's been really interesting. So these are changes that I think will roll out to everybody in a more direct capacity as time goes on. But right now, if you fiddle with it, you can get it working with FSR 4. And if you're not familiar with FSR in a general sense, it is an upscaling technology. It is specifically AMD's upscaling technology. NVIDIA has DLSS, which you may have heard discussed a little bit more often, but FSR has been around for a good long time as well. Not as good as DLSS in most cases, but FSR 4, 4.0, 4.1.1 is a massive step up from previous iterations in terms of quality, in terms of clarity of image, and things of that nature. And so you can fiddle around with the compatibility layers and enable FSR 4 on the Steam machine right now, and then kind of force games to use it in some cases, and games that use FSR 3 will kind of upgrade automatically. Sometimes in the menus, they will just straight up say FSR 4.1.1. Forza Horizon does this. A handful of other games. Cyberpunk will readily acknowledge the exact version. Some other games won't, and so you'll just have to assume that, like, oh, okay, well, it's clearly it's working. And I did this, and it has been it's a big deal in terms of again, the clarity of image. The problem with upscaling technology is that it is rendering the game in a lower resolution, and then through the power of algorithms and machine learning, it is then blowing it up to whatever resolution you're going for, whether that's 4K or 1440p or whatever. And so as a result of that, you are able to kind of squeeze more performance out of a thing because it's natively rendering at a lower resolution and then using magic powers to blow it up. And that's been the basis really of most GPU features and increases for the last handful of years have really been based around this upscaling stuff. Even consoles are using this. Obviously, the Switch 2 has NVIDIA parts in it, and DLSS is a possibility there. And PlayStation has been working with AMD for their own kind of flavor, their own kind of offshoot of this stuff, and that's what PSSR is. Anyway, my experience with the Steam machine as it ships was that there were a lot of games that just didn't run great, and you could not make them run great. My test bed game, The First Descendant, which is again, I have to underscore, it is not a. I'm not going to tell you it's a good video game. What I am going to tell you is that it is a perhaps overly demanding video game in a technical sense. In some ways, and it supports most of the modern features of modern games, letting you kind of play around with some of that stuff. And so it's kind of ended up becoming that testbed game for me. I don't intend to apologize for that. It's just how it's worked out. Anyway, FSR 3 with The First Descendant, all of that other stuff, basically unplayable. Or if you want to get it running at a playable frame rate, the image quality takes a huge dive to the point where it looks like swimmy, dreamy, like almost like an AI generated mess, or like you were playing a video game and the video game took DMT. I don't know. There's like it's this weird this weird, dreamy, fucked up looking quality and the fidelity on it is unacceptable. And that was the only way to get it running at a decent frame rate, was to turn up the FSR3 stuff to a degree that's just like, this looks bad. FSR4 completely changes the conversation around that particular game and also others. Again, it's kind of been, the test bed here. With FSR4 enabled, the First Descendant runs at an acceptable frame rate and looks sharp. And none of that weird algorithmic swimmy trash like artifacting and everything else. Like it looks like really good. You can't quite turn it all the way up. It's not like I can turn the ray tracing. Like ray tracing is still a huge hit for this thing on most games. If you turn it up past the kind of the lowest ray tracing setting in a lot of games, the frame rate is just going to be bad no matter what else you do. And so there's always going to be trade-offs. This is not, the Steam machine is not some endlessly powerful machine. Obviously, you can look at the specs and go, oh, okay. But FSR4 is able to kind of get more out of this in a way that is extremely impressive and makes this whole thing make a lot more sense as a device. Because once you start going, okay, let's crank it up to 1440p, because again, out of the box, the Steam machine is locked to 1080p. You can easily change that, but that's kind of what they consider the default sweet spot for a lot of games. And I think 1080p is a little too low if you're sitting and looking at a 4K television. 1440p is a really good resolution that splits the difference. It's not it does not have the weight of 4K, but it looks sharper than 1080p in a way that becomes a little bit harder to tell when you're sitting in front of that 4K TV. And so 1440p is a really good sweet spot. You layer, kind of modern FSR4 on top of that. You're starting to get image quality that is, in depending on the game, all this other stuff, blah, 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 caveats. You're starting to get image quality out of this that is a little bit more comparable to what you are seeing out of modern consoles. And it's a really big deal. It makes me curious to see, because they're working on updating this model for PlayStation 5 Pros, all the time. And so as they kind of push this stuff further forward there as well, I'm curious to see how that goes. These are the technologies that are going to be powering the next generation of consoles as well. And so to what degree does this stuff improve? FSR has always felt like, well, you get FSR and it's not DLSS, but it still helps a little bit, but it really doesn't look nearly as good. And, the trade-offs are very different. But like FSR4 is like, they're here. They did it. It is a pretty dramatic shift. I think it changes a lot of the conversations around, maybe not the highest of the high-end GPUs. That's still going to be, I think, largely dominated by just the raw power of what NVIDIA is shipping these days. Though that thing is, how much is a 5090 these days? 10 grand? I don't know, 5 grand, 4 grand. It is a stupid amount of money. But when we're talking, especially at a time when all of this hardware has become fucking ridiculous, like just overly expensive, the idea of like, hey, here are parts that are maybe a little bit closer to a normal person's price range, not quite there yet, but and it can look fantastic. And I think it's super impressive. It is not compatible across every single game at this time, and it's not the default experience on the Steam machine. You do have to tinker around with it. It is in Valve's own branch of Proton. The Proton experimental branch does apparently have FSR4 enabled there. I am using the CachyOS implementation. And that has been really fucking good. Really fucking good. It has changed a lot of my thoughts around the Steam machine in terms of its capabilities and what you're going to get out of it over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever. It is impressive stuff. Like the games that are able to take advantage of this right now are significantly improved, and that's been a very welcome surprise. There are still aspects of the Steam machine that are funky right now. They're in a like right now today. They're in a really strange place where like they made some changes to better support. I think it was ray tracing. I forget what it was exactly, but there was something they did specifically for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, that when they made that change, it actually broke just about every other game. And so if you're on the stable branch of the Steam machine, every game but Assassin's Creed works as advertised. If you're on the beta branch, Assassin's Creed works, but a lot of other games don't work. They're still working on porting those fixes over to the beta. Yeah, so they're in kind of an awkward place with a little bit of that stuff. And if you're on the stable branch, it still doesn't show you true compatibility ratings for the Steam machine. It defaults to just the generic Steam OS rating and all of that other stuff that we talked about last week. And so yeah, there's still some funky stuff. But as I've been continuing to mess with it, and sorry, Sagacious Snakes asks, when you're talking about these branches, are you talking Proton or a Steam OS level beta? I'm talking about the Steam client, the Steam OS situation. It is not a branch of Proton. There are basically 3 different branches you can turn on behind the scenes. That's stable, beta, and preview. Stable is the default one, obviously. Beta is a little bit advanced, and then preview will actually update the OS as well as the Steam client. Or will frequently do that, and so that's the one where they say like, I don't know, man, shit might break. I have not tried preview on a Steam machine yet. I don't know where they're at. The funny thing about the Steam machine, or I don't know, one of the funny things, like all of like the machine name on it is still Steam Deck. Like the Linux, the user account created on it is still named Deck. Like they didn't change a lot of stuff. I renamed it to Steam Machine because I have a Steam Deck and don't want to have 2 devices with the same name on the network and all that sort of stuff. But like the nice thing about this is that even though the Steam Machine is brand new, it is functionally identical to the Steam Deck when it comes to fucking around with it. And so when it comes to making changes under the hood and following tutorials that you find online for weird shit that you want to do with it, all those Steam Deck tutorials work. And so I was able to use some of that stuff to I'm now automatically mounting a network folder. So when I turn on the Steam machine, it connects to my network. It finds my server that has, I don't know what it is, 20 terabytes of old video games sitting there. And so I can bring those in without having to, I don't have to like copy into an SD card and put the SD card in the Steam machine, all this other stupid shit. It can just find it all right there. It treats it as a network mount, and it auto connects at login. There's a funny thing that the Steam Deck and machine do that's actually really smart, but is actually really frustrating in this specific instance. They use an immutable kind of design for their OS, and this is to prevent you from getting in there and breaking it. There's a lot of stuff that is overwritten every time there's a system update. It will overwrite your changes, and so if you've done shit to it, those can be overwritten. There is now, as of about a year ago, I think, a process to where you can say, hey, it's cool that you do that, but leave this file alone, and don't touch this file, or files in this directory, don't do this. And so I've done that for the file that needs to be updated in order for it to connect to the network and do all of this other stuff. And so that survives system updates and the like. Hopefully it doesn't break in a different way on some update where they're like, no, we need to fuck with the file system. We need to fuck with the table. We need to fix this. And I said, no, don't ever touch it again. And maybe that will break everything someday, but that's all fixable. At the end of the day, it's just one line of text in a text file that makes that shit work. So it's not that hard to throw it back in there now that I've done it. It was like a daunting tutorial of like, okay, go find your Fstab, edit it, put this line in here. Oh, by the way, that line's not going to work for you for reasons of fucking who knows. So you need to experiment around with it. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't we remove the user ID and all this other stuff and just have it do it under the default user? And okay, that works. That works. Okay. That magically worked. Magic Linux, man. But yeah, I don't know. It has been fun. The kids have been using it to play a handful of games. They're playing. I mean, I suppose I am also playing. What is the name of this thing with the balls? Bang on Balls Chronicles, which is from 2023. You're a little ball. You hop around. You get swords and tomatoes and shit. And Bang on Balls kind of seems like a smaller take on it. It is similar in concept to something like Goat Simulator, where you just like fuck up shit and there are like quests and objectives to complete, but you were just kind of going around breaking shit. And I don't know, that's been fun. We have also been playing Rock Bottom, which is a digging game, kind of an incremental game, but you are digging to get ore, and then you are taking the ore back, and you are crafting and buying upgrades, and eventually getting jetpacks and stuff. That is a game that does not have controller support, but we're playing it with a Steam controller, and you just kind of use the right touchpad or the right stick to aim where you want to dig, but it is meant to be a mouse. When I play it here on the proper PC, it controls better. It is easier to manage, but they're having a really good time digging. The kids, they just want to dig. So that's been pretty good. Why don't we take a break? We'll come back. We'll talk about a handful of other games that I have been playing recently. After this. Keeping track of your finances doesn't have to be a time-consuming, stressful thing. You know? Used to be to get into this like, okay, I gotta look at my bank account over here and my credit cards over here. Rocket Money puts everything together for you so you can get a handy, simple look right there on your phone about what's going on. Are you spending too much money on food deliveries? Are you shopping too much? Are you saving the amount of money that you're trying to save? All of this stuff Rocket Money can keep track of for you. And they've got some bonus premium features that really help with subscription services. It'll tell you like, hey man, you're paying for 2 of these, which I don't know how people end up with that somehow. But let you know, hey, you should cancel one of these. Or hey, there's a price here that we think is a little high, and maybe we can get a better deal for you. Or maybe you want to cancel this if you're not using it. Rocket Money will go out and help you cancel some of your subscriptions or negotiate for a better price on your behalf. You give them the details about your account, and they go off and handle business, and they come back to you with the result and let you know. It's saved me hundreds of dollars on cell phone bills and satellite radio and stuff over the years that, these prices just keep going up and up and up every year. So having Rocket Money be like your, I don't know, attack dog, a little defender, a defender of your wallet to go out there and act on your behalf to try to save you some money is fantastic. It'll also set up, automated kind of saving stuff that'll grow towards goals, with adjustable amounts and frequency. You can set budgets. You can set goals. It'll give you insights and reports about what you're doing. It'll give you a real-time alert if a large transaction comes through. It'll let you know when upcoming bills are coming. It'll let you know when money hits your account. You're like, okay, payday happened. Nice. I guess I get to keep this job for another 2 weeks. Just all that sort of stuff Rocket Money can just give you upfront and fast. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/JeffG. That's rocketmoney.com/JeffG. rocketmoney.com/JeffG. And we're back. So I have also been playing Lazy Kickers. Speaking of incrementally focused video games, this is from the developers, the huge team behind the McPixel franchise, and it is a soccer game, I guess. It is in theory a game about soccer. But you're buying, so you're starting out with an empty soccer field, and you are earning money that then you use to buy players, and you have to plant plants on the field because the plants grow, and when they pop, soccer balls pop out of them, and so the players will get the soccer balls and kick them into the goal. You eventually can kind of take your players and assign them to different roles. So you assign them to be shooters, meaning they'll only kick the ball at the goal, or they can be farmers, so they're always watering the plants so that you get more soccer balls. You can get bankers, and bankers only go around and collect the coins that pop out when you do these things, because if you don't collect the money, you can't buy more upgrades, and it's a whole thing. You can get streakers, and when streakers get naked, coins pop out of them. And in later levels, you start to get opposing ninjas that will stop they will kick your balls out of the way. They will stop your plants from growing. All of that sort of stuff, like a ninja would do. And so you can turn some of your purchased players into hooligans that will chase the ninjas around and beat the shit out of them. And then once you hit a certain goal, you can effectively end the game, which in incremental concepts is you prestiging, sort of, and you get a separate currency that then you use to buy an additional layer of upgrades on top of all of that to increase the multiplier for the money you get. You're unlocking new player types as you go. There's all this other stuff. It is the only soccer game that matters. It is the only thing related to soccer that has ever mattered, as far as I'm concerned. And it has, as far as I can tell, it has exactly 2 songs in it. There is one song that plays while you are playing the game, and one song that plays while you are in the boss fight, which is sort of the last team of the league. And both of those songs, at any given time over the last week or so, has been completely stuck in my, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and just going doom 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 doom, and it's just like, okay, I gotta go to the bathroom and I gotta go back to sleep, and it is just there and it never goes away, and that has been my life for the last week or so. Lazy Kickers is quite good. It sounds like it's, looking at the Steam page for Lazy Kickers, it seems like it is maybe about 10 hours of action, but also it's like $3 or $2 or something. What I'll go look. Yeah, it's $2.24 right now. So you go get you some Lazy Kickers. It's real silly. At higher levels, once everyone gets moving really fast and there's just coins flying everywhere and players, it gets crazy. There's a ton of upgrades that I have not unlocked yet because I'm still in only the 3rd league or something. So it seems like a thing that just fucking gets stupid. Which is what you want, which is what can the only thing that can make a soccer game matter. Yeah, so Lazy Kickers is really awesome. I mean, McPixel is really awesome. You should go buy the McPixel games again if you haven't. Densha Attack came out. This is the game that I remember as the game that showed up in a Nintendo Direct and went like, holy shit. It is a game in which you control a train, and that train can do tricks, and it's very flashy. It is very fast moving. The design of it, beyond that, like the part where you're a train that can do tricks, is fucking top notch, because you make the train jump, you do kick flips and heel flips, and you're changing tracks and flipping thing, like you are doing a bunch of really cool Tony Hawk-esque shit in that aspect of the game. You can land in a manual and do manuals until you get your next trick going. You can grind on rails. Like it's real silly. But it's not a skateboarding. You're not going anywhere you want. You are a train. You are on train tracks. And so the levels have a very kind of hard and fast design to them about how you're going to go through them. And as a result of that, like, it is much more about you racing across these tracks, completing objectives along the way. And at times it almost felt like a snowboarding game. People have likened it to some of maybe a little bit of kind of Sonic the Hedgehog racing style, maybe like a Sonic R-esque sort of thing in some spots. I get it. I don't know that it's necessarily. I would not brand it with that scarlet letter. I would not bring it down by calling it a Sonic the Hedgehog game, because I think that's doing the game a disservice to compare it to such fucking filth. But it's really interesting. It'll have goals like you need to collect 5 things. And so this is where there's kind of a bit of a rub for it for me, because you're kind of only going through the level once. And if you miss one of the things you need to collect, you either need to crash right there so that you start at a checkpoint behind the item you need to collect, or you need to do the level again. And I don't know that these are levels that I necessarily want to do again. Like, they're fun, they're very flashy. You're doing all of this stuff and bopping between the rails and back onto the railroad tracks, and then grinding on a pipe, and then hitting a big ramp and doing a bunch of spins and landing back on the tracks. You're even doing things like you're making big towers crash to the ground, and you're taking out other trains. Like, there's a good variety to the levels on top of all of this. And all of that stuff is really neat, but I think like that's been the part of it that has kind of kept me from getting super deep into it, is just some of the objectives and stuff I'm not finding very engaging. There are later levels, like, even in the very first world, you find a level that is way more trick focused. And so you are kind of moving around the rails until you're done, until you've gotten all the points you need to get, and then you can kind of stop when you want to stop, and you complete a handful of objectives, and so you're kind of going around in more of a loop on that one, as opposed to like a racetrack or snowboarding hill kind of mountain metaphor sort of deal. The other thing that happens is, like, in my head, I think about it, because it does have this kind of skateboarding game-like trick system. I am always holding down the jump button, which by default is the right trigger. But there's a brake button, but there's no gas. It is no gas, all brakes. And so I'm always holding down that right trigger, partially because it feels good, because it kind of feels like a gas button, but you're charging up your jump. And so if you jump at the wrong time, you fly off the rails and crash into nothing, and you have to go back to a checkpoint. That's the thing. That's the thing that's very integral to the game that they've made. You couldn't do this game without that. Like, that is a major aspect of the game. So it is not me saying, boy, I wish it didn't have that, because it would be really strange. But there's something, like, the game has a great deal of freedom to it in the trick system and the feel of all of that stuff. There's a lot of tricks you can do, and when you're doing it right, you're flying between these rails and doing all this stuff, and it feels very free form. But in reality, it is extremely not. It is extremely not a freeform game, because you can fly off the tracks at any given time and crash and have to go back to a checkpoint. And that specific aspect of it, I think, is keeping me from enjoying this as much as I want to. It has a great look to it. The soundtrack is awesome. Like, it's got a kind of a neat story going through it. And the trick system feels very wonderful. And there's just a lot of really cool things going on. There's good variety that you'll stumble upon in some of the kind of side levels, or things that are not just the standard level type. There's some cool shit there. At one point, you turn into a boat for a while. You're riding the train on walls. Like, you're doing a lot of wild shit in this game. You're fighting bosses even. But like that specific part of it is kind of not. It is pushing me away, I think, from it a little bit. And so I played it. There's a video up on YouTube right now if you want to check that out of me kind of getting started with it. And I think if you watch that, you'll see what I'm talking about. I've played some more of it since then, but I have not devoured it the way that I maybe thought that I would. It's cool. You should definitely at least give it. Go watch that video. Go watch that video on YouTube. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Follow the whatever. Hit the slam dunk the bell. And go look at that. And there's a demo out also if you want to get a feel for it too. It's neat. Let's see. What else is going on? They showed some, I guess we're kind of getting into the news. So I played some Forsaken for the PC last Friday. As I am always ranking Nintendo 64 games, on last Friday's installment of that, we looked at Forsaken 64. Forsaken, if you don't remember, is a Descent-like. And so it is one of those 6 degrees of freedom kind of first-person shooter sort of situations. And that N64 game really holds up, but it is still a little flat, I guess I would say. The levels are largely designed for multiplayer, and so some of the levels are just like, go kill all the enemies. And you're just kind of getting lost in these large circular levels looking for the one enemy you didn't find. And so some of that stuff is a little weird to go back to. But I remember enjoying Forsaken at the time, and it does hold up pretty well in terms of the other N64 games that I have ranked thus far. It has this killer, and by killer, I mean not great, but great intro, featuring the voice of John St. John, featuring the voice of Duke Nukem, doing a not quite Duke Nukem voice. And it's really something to be seen. It has a lot of characters in it, like Beard and LAJ. And so that N64 game is something else. That led me to reinstall the PC version of the game, which was remastered by Night Dive not that long ago, like a year or two back. Which at the time I remember thinking like, okay, why? Okay, sure. Forsaken, I guess. And so I went and played some of the PC version of Forsaken. It is an entirely different game. With some of this, it has the same weapons and some of the same things, but like the level design is way more focused on being a single player focused game with like clear cut objectives. It has a freaking map, which the N64 game does not. It does not have the John St. John voiceover. It has like some more British sounding dude in it. The PC version is like completely, you only have 3 characters unlocked at the beginning. Thankfully, one of them is LAJ. And the characters have voice lines as you're playing it. And so I played as Beard because Beard had the best stats. And it has this like so fucking edgy late 90s fucking like, take that, bitch. Like just the dumbest fucking voice lines I have ever fucking heard, man. Holy shit. The PC version of Forsaken is not the N64 version of Forsaken. It is better. It is better in some ways. It is not. It is way worse in some others. It is not the game I was hoping for. I was hoping to be able to extract some of the dialogue from the intro for the N64 version and maybe use it on the soundboard, but apparently that's not in the PC version of the game, which is unfortunate. But here we are. So yeah, I spent some time with that. I don't know, man. What else is going on? Let's get into the news. They showed some Modern Warfare 4. They put out some multiplayer videos of that, and it's looking interesting. I do think so. One of the things that they're focusing on, it kind of reminds me of like the first year of them doing a battle royale when they did Blackout. but they have this kind of modular map that they're using called Kill Block. And within that Kill Block, they're using prefab. They're kind of attaching prefab parts of levels together. And a lot of those levels are maps from other older games, which they're always fucking remaking and reissuing maps all the time. And I think that they do way too much of that. And they've been doing way too much of that over the years. But I think the idea of doing that in the form of a map that is a little bit modular and is going to be different every time you see it, or, you know, within reason, I think that is a really good place to put those kind of nostalgic, like, here's the fucking map with the helicopter in the middle of it from Call of Duty 4. You found it. It's in the middle of this Kill Block map. And then next time it's going to not be there because instead it's going to be the fucking map with all the middle inside part of that other map from Call of Duty 4. So, you know, it seems like a cooler use of those kind of nostalgic map designs as opposed to just like blowing an entire fucking map on like, we made an all new version of it and the helicopter has never been more explodey in the middle of this map. And so some of the stuff they're doing with that looks pretty good. I'm very interested to kind of see more of it. And and some of the gunplay and the movement and some of the stuff they're showing for the game, I think looks really intriguing. Within, you know, like they're not doing anything crazy. Like the whole point of this game seems to be that they kind of want to rein it back in a little bit, right? Because I don't know if you've played the current Call of Duty. It's got wall running and all of this other stuff, and you know, it's a whole thing. And so this feels like them trying to push something resembling a reset button and go, which you know, this is what they do, right? Every handful of years they get out and they did not say it this time because I think they have to wait one more cycle before they can use the phrase boots on the ground. But this is something they are constantly doing, right? They are rebooting the game. They are getting fucking way out there in ways that players go, you're doing a bunch of blah, 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 blah. And then they say, we hear you. And then they go, okay, we're making a World War II game. And then that shits the bed a little bit. And then who knows where we go from there. But this doesn't, I don't know. The campaign will continue the story of Captain Price and Soap and so on and so forth in the campaign. And I think that has some, like in the last one of those they did, that campaign was not good, but like one of the major characters that you played as in that game got fucking smoked at the end of that game. And so, you know, that's kind of neat. There's like something, there's stakes there. You know, Captain Price went out and did some fucking weird shit and fucking shot, like the end cutscene of that last one is him shooting a fucking general and then like fully going rogue. Like there's a lot of real, they got out there. And so I don't know, there's stuff about that story that I think is potentially interesting as well. Mixing in all the Korean stuff, I think is, well, remains to be seen, but what they're showing so far, I think is interesting. Yeah, that stuff's out there. In Marathon news, today is a very exciting day for Marathon, and it's been kind of a weird week for Marathon. The director of the game, Joe Ziegler, has left Bungie as of Friday. Friday was apparently his last day. As VideoGamesChronicle.com notes, Ziegler came over from Riot, where he was the director of Valorant for some period of time. And he has a new gig lined up. He's posted that Marathon is going to be run by new people. Del Chafe III, who was previously the assistant game director, and creative director Julia Nardin. He says both of them have been operating in a strong leadership capacity for the team and are ready to guide Marathon into the next chapter with an even better and brighter future. I'm proud of them, and I'm excited to see them helm the future of this crazy little world we've created together. As for me, I'll be heading to something new somewhere else, and we'll update you on where and what soon. So yeah, I don't know. Like you know, people find jobs, right? I mean, opportunities come people's way, and they say it's time for me to go. I think a studio that has laid off this many people and all this other stuff going on, I think it's very easy to say, if another opportunity came along, maybe I would look at that. And that sounds like that's what happened there. It's hard to know if this is, I'll put it this way. You can't necessarily say this is a sign that like, oh, they're totally screwed. Because sometimes, people just like to move and change jobs, and sometimes people need to go places. And he kind of came in on the heels of them losing the lead, who, to hear other Bungie employees tell it, was not a good person. But I don't know. I was not there for any of that. I was not there for any of this. So what can I say? But he was accused of some stuff. There was a lawsuit, a whole thing. And so he was brought in kind of on the tail end of that whole situation. And so he was there, got the game out the door, got it to where it's going to get to, was able to hand it off to someone else. It's not, it's not necessarily a sign that the whole game is fucked or that the studio is fucked. You could look at other things that are going on and go like, yeah, this doesn't seem like the healthiest sort of thing that they're doing, the healthiest game that has ever shipped. But they also, in exciting news, they have shipped their kind of mid-season update today, and that comes with a whole new, I guess it could be single player or it could be co-op, and all of that sort of stuff, depending on how you want to do it. But it is a PvE mode that is set inside the Cryo Archive, which is the big kind of end game content that they introduced in Season 1. That is super awesome looking, and a lot of players are maybe not going to be good enough to see it in its kind of traditional form. So finding a way to put out a PvE mode and be able to allow more players to experience that content in some way, shape, or form is fantastic. This is kind of the thing I've been waiting for a bit here, ever since they announced they're doing this. It is sort of weird because this mode is only going to be live for 2 weeks, but apparently they have much more PvE stuff planned for the next season. And so we'll kind of see where they get to as they kind of build this stuff out and figure out where they're going to go from here. And so that's pretty awesome news. That is basically, I am fucking, as soon as the sun goes down and all of these kids go to bed, it is going to be marathon time for me. And I'm really looking forward to checking that stuff out. But yeah, a change at the top is always a little weird, especially for a game that has the perception of being this kind of embattled thing. Everyone who wants to give comment on it officially is, of course, always saying like, yes, of course, we love, and Bungie is saying we've got years of stuff planned out because what else are they going to go on? Sony has been supportive every time they have brought the game up, but of course they would be. They have cut and run from too many games at this point to do it again without it looking way, way worse for them. So they're going to ride this out either way. It's a real shame to have these sorts of conversations about a game that is as fucking good as Marathon is. But I guess this is the fucking way of the world, man. At this point, we're halfway through the year. If I had to pick a game of the first half of the year, it is easily fucking Marathon. Like nothing else even comes close. It is fucking awesome. So we'll see what the back half of the year has to offer. I don't know what else is shipping. Is there anything big shipping this year? Anything else coming out? I don't know. Maybe Marathon will just hang on to it. But nothing has been better than Marathon so far this calendar year. Let's take one more break. We'll come back and talk about the rest of the news. Okay. People say it all the time, but I don't know that a lot of people actually follow through. But I'm going to say it again. You should probably get a better bed. You spend hours every day. I mean, ideally, hours every day in your bed. You should try to get one that helps you. One that's supportive without being stiff, soft without sinking. Exactly what you need for genuine rest every single night. Comfort. That's where Lisa comes in. Lisa has amazing mattresses. I've been sleeping on a Lisa mattress for a little while now, and it's been really great. A really big step up from the stuff I had before. This some of this memory foam stuff can be so soft and terrible and destroying your back and all of this. Lisa has a firmness to it at the core of it that is supporting your body instead of just letting you sink all the way in like you were sleeping in quicksand or something. The Lisa mattress is quality through and through. They've got a lineup of beautifully crafted mattresses tailored to how you sleep. Each one of those mattresses is designed with specific sleep positions and feel preferences in mind. So you can go to their website, take a little quiz, and it'll recommend a mattress for you based on like, oh, hey, you're a side sleeper. You know, do you weigh this? Are you this size? What, you know, like, do you need for two people? What sort of thing are you doing? Their sleep quiz will help you find that perfect match in 2 minutes or less. Lisa mattresses are meticulously designed and assembled in the United States of America for exceptional quality, and they back it all up with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night sleep trial. Wow. Go to lisa.com to get 25% off plus an extra $50 off with the promo code Jeff. That's exclusive for you. That's LEESA.com, promo code Jeff for 25% off plus an extra $50 off. And hey, when you use that code, you're supporting the show. Lisa.com, promo code Jeff. I got a very surprising press release into my email inbox at 6:20 a.m. this morning. When tides turn, a newly formed studio led by arcade racing veteran Fiona Sperry and comprised of industry veterans responsible for some of the genre's most beloved arcade driving experiences, announced Wreckreation 2, a new open-world arcade racer built specifically for anyone who craves the raw speed, heavy impacts, and pure chaos of classic arcade driving. So there's a couple bits of news in there. One, they're going to make a sequel to Wreckreation. This was the game from a lot of the people, or some people that worked on the Burnout franchise, the classic arcade driving franchise from Criterion Games. Wreckreation launched in kind of a weird state, and they continued to patch it and work on it. They eventually launched a Patreon to kind of help keep the game running and keep the studio up and running, to kind of fund further development of that. They had interest, like if you backed them to a certain degree, they had a guitar that they had all signed, a bunch of stuff. So not only is there going to be a Wreckreation 2, they have also announced a brand new studio led by the person who led Three Fields Entertainment, which was the studio that brought you Wreckreation 1. This new studio is called When Tides Turn, and I don't exactly know what happened here, what sort of business dealings led to this having to change. Three Fields Entertainment was around for a while. They made Dangerous Driving, they made Dangerous Golf, they made that VR shooting game. They made a handful of things over the years, kind of all eventually leading up to Wreckreation, which Wreckreation was a pretty good open world driving game that lacked a lot of the polish and stuff that you would want from a brand new Burnout game, but in a world where EA is never going to make another one of those ever again. Ever again. In a lot of ways, Wreckreation was as close as you were going to get. They did a lot of neat stuff where you could plop ramps down in the world and kind of create your own tracks and do some of this kind of stuff. And so it had a lot of cool things, but never quite got there. As they continue to update it, they put in a whole new drifting model and all of this other stuff. Like the updates were good, the updates were solid, but it still just kind of never quite got there. And so now they are making a direct sequel to that game, and they have like a trailer. There is a page on Steam where you can wish list Wreckreation 2. It's like a fairly fully featured rollout. They're developing it for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. They have not announced a date. And there's kind of not, they've got some quotes in here that obviously they're making a sequel to this game, so they're kind of referencing it, but not overly so. Sperry is quoted as saying, "Over the last 6 months, we've been talking directly to players about what they want from a modern arcade driving game, and Wreckreation 2 as a result of those conversations. From handling and progression to events and world design, our community has already helped shape key aspects of the experience. We're building this game with the players, not just for them." Which speaks to, I mean, they are continuing to run that Patreon, like the Patreon updated to, they changed the name of it to Wreckreation 2. And they said, "We made a double announcement today." Then they talked about their trailer. And they say the second announcement is that we formed a new studio when Tide's term. This will become the new home of the game. While Wreckreation began life at Three Fields Entertainment, we've reached a point where it makes sense for the project to have a new home, one that we owned completely. I don't know if, just some equity situation at Three Fields became a problem. If THQ Nordic ended up owning some part of the company as a result of the publishing of the first game, or maybe some founders are parting ways as part of this. I don't have the straight dope about the exact situation here. But that is the reasoning that they're giving. They're saying nothing has changed about the people making the game. It's still the same team with the same passion and the same ambition to build the best open world arcade racer we possibly can. This is simply the next step in our journey. So that's kind of crazy. And also they're able to keep the same Patreon. The Patreon did not stick with, I imagine that, the Three Fields has dissolved as a part of this and is not some going concern. I don't know the actual answer to that question. But yes, as you may have noticed, as Fat Scout points out in the chat, Alex Ward seems to no longer be involved with it. Yes, his name often mentioned alongside Fiona Sperry's when it comes to talking about the history of their work together on the Burnout franchise and, of course, on most of the Three Fields games. This was something I kind of started sniffing out a little bit around the release of Wreckreation. I was just like, he seems like he's maybe not around anymore, or is taking a back seat or something, or I don't know exactly what the situation is there, and I still don't. But it sounds like that this team is continuing to work on arcade racing game. The trailer looks good. The trailer is set in a city, which is something that Wreckreation 1 kind of didn't have, and would benefit from. And so this already looks better than the first game. And I don't know. I'm excited to see what they do. I feel like Wreckreation, the first game, the thing I think I said at the time and what I would stick to is I think that game had really great bones, and then there were just things about the events and the things that you did to complete tasks in that game that were not fully cooked. And of course they patched and patched and patched, and they worked on a large number of updates to that game post release, seemingly, under the gun and underfunded, because, remember, they launched a Patreon to keep the studio afloat at a point here. So, so they still managed to put out a lot of updates, even seemingly under some financial strain, and to see them get to a point where they're able to take another crack at it, kind of cool, if nothing else. So it's a really strange announcement. I never would have expected them to make a sequel to this game. It seemed like a situation where it's like, this game came out, it didn't really hit. They put out a lot of updates, and they have like fans that really appreciated those updates, but it's not like, it didn't really seem like that was growing the number of players or whatever. Like on the business side of it, you looked at it and go like, I don't know if this is going to work out for them. And then they launched a Patreon, and you're like, that's cool. That's an interesting and novel way to do this, but it doesn't exactly paint a picture of health. But if they're able to kind of pivot, form a new studio, still have the name, and be able to make a sequel to it, that's kind of cool. They are listed as the publisher of record on the Steam page. So it seems like THQ Nordic, who in concept published that game, but in my experience, that was just in name only in terms of like their representation of that game in the marketplace and sending it out to people, or at the time, it was getting to be awards season, and they were contacting me about other games in their portfolio and being like, hey, for Game Awards judging, would you be interested in seeing this game or this game or this game? And I was like, what about Wreckreation? Isn't that out in like 2 weeks? I'm like, yeah. You can contact this person about it. And then like, it just didn't really seem like that they were putting that game out in front of people, very effectively. That's from my perspective. I don't know. Maybe different writers or different outlets or whatever had a different experience with that. But in my experience, it really seemed like that they just didn't want to talk about it for a very long time, and didn't. They put out a trailer and then just kind of didn't follow up on that in any kind of meaningful way. But now they're forming a new studio, and it seems like that maybe there have been some parting of ways here. It seems like perhaps some tides have turned. I don't know. Either way, the trailer for Wreckreation 2 looks pretty strong. And if they're building on the foundation of what they built and then patched up over the course of Wreckreation 1, I think they're probably in a pretty good place. So I'm very curious to kind of see what they end up doing with it. They do have they already have a page up on Steam. They have not announced a release date, but they have been, I guess they ran a live stream alongside this. So not just the trailer, they had some kind of like raw gameplay of wherever the build is at this current time, which is, I don't know. That's kind of cool. We'll see. Very unexpected, very, very unexpected, but a welcome announcement as well. The Call of Duty movie. They're making a Call of Duty movie, which is, I don't know, man. I guess you can. Why wouldn't you? Of course, it's a popular thing, but I feel like Call of Duty over the years has taken so many different things that have appeared in films, whether it was the lingo and the general style of Black Hawk Down and, some of the other, your Hurt Lockers and what have you. There's so many different things that they have borrowed from the world of film, that when you take these games that are designed to be this sort of Hollywood blockbuster kind of thing, and then you make the snake eat its own tail by shoving it back into theaters in some weird way. It's always just such a strange concept. They have acknowledged here, this was out of Fanatics Fest in New York, which seems like if you want to get people's autographs and pay way too much money for them, Fanatics Fest is for you. I don't know. It seems like a lot of wrestlers go there, and then you pay $500 to stand in a line and stand next to like Roman Reigns for 4 seconds or something stupid like that. I don't know. Anyway, video games decided they wanted to get in on the act, and so they let people play Modern Warfare 4 at this thing as well. And they had Peter Berg, who was the director, discuss the film a little bit. This is from their social media. They have announced that the film will come out June 30th, 2028, and that it is set in the Modern Warfare universe. Meaning Captain Price and Soap and Ghost and all of that sort of stuff. That is the storyline that makes the most sense, because that is, if we had to pluck memorable characters from Call of Duty and like start this franchise off as a film, this is what you do. You do these guys. You don't do Black Ops, because the story of Black Ops over the years has become so convoluted, because of what the last handful of those games have been, from basically Cold War 4, well, whatever, no, from fucking Black Ops 3 forward. it has become absolute nonsense. They're like, what if you were dead the whole time and the whole story was unfolding in your head and it's set in the far future and Christopher Maloney is here? And then what if there was no campaign, but we had all these characters? This lady has a mohawk and a grenade launcher and what have you. And then to wrap it back around to, the stuff that's in Black Ops 6 and 7, it's a lot. I do think that, like, you could make an interesting film out of the early Black Ops games, but that's not tying into modern current Call of Duty the way that they would want to for, marketing purposes or fucking whatever. And so it's much easier to go like, here's a British guy with a mustache and he's fucking mad and they're going to go off and get in the shit, brother. This guy wears a mask and his name is Ghost and he's wearing a mask. That's a way easier fucking set of characters to market. So yes, I think that makes perfect sense. If you want to do your numbers station fucking mind bending, so that's the thing. Okay, so I'm never gonna fucking get on any of this prediction market gambling bullshit because it's killing fucking society. However, what do you think the odds are that they end this movie with some kind of post-credits sequence that references the numbers and talks and just like gives you a little hint of just like, oh yeah, Black Ops is a thing? Like, they clearly will want to build this into something larger than just a film. They will clearly want to build a Call of Duty cinematic universe because no one is capable of just making a movie, right? So of course, at some point during the credits, you have all of the scrolling words on screen turn into numbers and start floating away, and then you see a man in the fucking chair, which everyone has just seen again because Black Ops 1 just went back on sale, so everyone launched that again and went like, oh right, yeah, look at this menu, what a cool menu. It's like an interrogation room. Fucking crazy. Right? I mean, of course you do that. Or yes, you have Dave Chappelle and Cheech and Chong and Snoop Dogg show up at the end and say, we're ready to fight too, throwing my grenade, and then it cuts to black. That is actually a better that is a better option. But they won't do that. Ubisoft is fucking weird now. I don't know if you noticed, but as they seem to be reforming what it means to be Ubisoft and break that company up into a bunch of different teams, and some of those teams are part of a joint venture that Ubisoft doesn't even own 100% of anymore, and so on and so forth. They're making some weird moves, and it seems like that they're in a place where, like, hey, some games just aren't going to be ready to ship for a good long time. And so it seems to be that they are teasing, and by teasing, I mean something leaked on the Xbox dashboard about Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands Definitive Edition. And this is a graphic that apparently appeared on the dash. That they're saying comes with a major update, a new mission called Last Rites, and the full game will be playable at 60 frames per second and in 4K. So they're doing some sort of update to it, and that it will include the deluxe pack, season pass, year 2 pass, all the other kind of DLC shit that they put out for the game originally. Okay, looks like some of these cosmetic packs are actually new. So new cosmetics, a new mission, and according to Video Games Chronicle, this has shown up on the Xbox and PlayStation stores. Okay, so the definitive edition is already out, but again, because these games were on last generation consoles, it's like this definitive edition thing is showing up as like PS4 and Xbox One. But it does seem to be that they are kind of building towards some sort of re-release for this game that may then appear on new consoles. The Ghost Recon Twitter account, which apparently exists, claims that there is an announcement coming about Ghost Recon on August 6th. It's been a while, Ghosts. We know some of you saw some updates. We'll have more to say on the 6th of August when we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Ghost Recon. Intel coming soon. I love it when they talk that military talk. Intel. They're going to have Intel for us. Wildlands is a fucking weird game. I recently reinstalled it, actually, and played some more of it on PlayStation. And it's fun. It is like power fantasy crazy because of how overpowered your posse is. Like when you highlight a bunch of targets and say, "You guys shoot them," they'll shoot them, and you can really fucking rip fucking whole crews apart real easily. And it's kind of fun as a fucking generic open world game. And it is precisely the type of video game that maybe we don't get enough of these days, but and maybe that's a sickness that is making me enjoy it more than I would have normally. But when I reinstalled it, I was like, yeah, this game is not good, but it's fine. They added a mode to it post-launch back in the day that was like a realistic mode that turned off all the gear score. Oh, maybe that's for Breakpoint. Maybe I'm mixing up Wildlands and Breakpoint. Because after playing a bunch of Wildlands, I actually went and reinstalled Breakpoint as well, and Breakpoint is not nearly as good. Yeah, the gear score stuff was from Breakpoint. Anyway, Wildlands was fun and kind of stupid in some spots, but still a pretty decent time if you wanted like generic military action thing. And if they made that look better on consoles, like, I don't know, that's not the worst thing in the world. I don't know that I would recommend, like, if they put this out and it's a full price thing based on them just going like, now it's a higher resolution and frame rate and we added a new mission and we're willing to sell you some new cosmetics, like that's a bit much. But we'll see what they have to say about the future of Ghost Recon, I guess. Todd Howard made the rounds after Jason Schreier did some reporting at Bloomberg that kind of confirmed this stuff. They got out and said it officially. Todd Howard got out and talked to Schreier as well as a couple of other spots, and they also posted an update to the website over at Bethesda to say, "Hey man, we're making more Fallout stuff." So they officially confirmed that Obsidian is going to be making a new game in the Fallout universe, and they're also saying that Fallout 5 is in pre-production. Which, yeah, I mean, they pretty much. I guess they didn't really come out and say it at the time, but it was pretty obvious that back when they announced Elder Scrolls in the wake of saying, "Hey, we're working on Starfield," like it seemed pretty firm that they were then going to make a Fallout game at BGS. But here we are. They've also finally confirmed, yes, they're going to be making remasters or some kind of new issue versions of both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, which a lot of people, when they report that specific bit of the news, have called it one of the worst kept secrets in the history of video games, which is true, but it's been a long enough time now that now I'm wondering if the Fallout 3 remaster that everyone knew was happening like has since been killed and now someone else is doing it, or like there's been some kind of weird change around that, because like it's been so long that you're just like, I don't know, did someone start on a remaster and then it sucked and so now someone else is doing it, or what took so long? It's really kind of strange. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at with Fallout. I think it's fine. It is the thing I've kind of been saying all along with this stuff is it's kind of a bummer that this feels like a reaction. Like this feels like them trying to win people back over onto their side post layoffs. There's been this kind of trend, and it's hard to know where some of this stuff comes from. It's easy to get very conspiratorial about it and say that it is coming from management. But we've seen we have this stuff here of them getting out and saying we're working on a bunch of Fallout stuff. It's great. Everybody loves Fallout. Similarly, Hugo Martin of id got out and said, hey, we have a lot of people here still at id. We're still perfectly capable of making games, and we have people in other parts of the world that work on the engine as well, and so we have what we need to get going on the next thing. Which then there's been some reporting in the wake of that, refuting a little bit of that, and from both current and former employees at id saying like, yeah, I don't know if I buy that. And I don't want to. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle on that one. It's hard to kind of know exactly what resources they'll have and what sort of support they'll get from Microsoft going forward. But I'll put it to you this way: if they were going to not let id make another game, they would have just laid them all off, right? And they still have a lot more layoffs to go. So we'll see. We'll see what happens after they cut another 1,600 people. Who is where and what happens with all of that stuff. So I don't know. It's tricky stuff. It's always, all that stuff is always very tricky stuff because you've got people, like I said a little bit, I think I said it last week on the bonus show, you get people that get laid off, and obviously that's fucking terrible. And they are kind of the first in your thoughts. And then you have the people that don't get laid off that are left to pick up the pieces and are like, wait, do I even still have a job? Will I have a job next year? What are we able to make now that we're so reduced? What are we? And so like, and there's the people that are left to kind of work in the wake of that and have to figure out all of this stuff all over again. And the kind of like survivor's guilt type stuff that comes along with that. Like there are fucking no winners here. There are just degrees of loss. The people who lost their jobs, obviously, again, at the top of that list. There's been some more stuff around the business. Disney had some pretty big layoffs. I don't know how much of that is in games. Hasbro has taken some impairment write-down type stuff for their gaming efforts that seemed a little overblown even back when they announced them. And so it remains to be seen what sort of projects they're going to be doing going forward. And then we've got the kind of ongoing saga of PlayStation's decision to get out of the physical disc business. This has resulted in a lot of the kind of standard feedback that you would expect from a moment like this, and there's starting to be collateral damage on this. This is something that VGC spotted, but it's something that I kind of heard a little bit of going around. So PlayStation will do these co-marketing deals, right? And sometimes these deals will be like, hey, as part of you publishing your game here, we'll do this, we'll do this. We'll post your trailer on our Twitter account. We'll post it on our social media. We'll do this sort of stuff. And what's happening is that completely unrelated posts and trailers and all of this other stuff from small indie teams in a lot of cases are getting absolutely bombarded with negative comments that are specifically about the physical game stuff. This is something that a developer called Eat Pant Games out of New Zealand. They put out a game called Tito, which is a 3D platformer about a blob and a bunny, according to VGC. And then the PlayStation posted that trailer on their YouTube channel, and it got 400 comments, but all of the comments are about physical games and all of that shit. Again, not entirely surprising, right? Like that is a fairly standard thing that, you know, it probably shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing that, you know, that gets, you know, when people are mad about a thing, they spam up everything they possibly can. Someone was noting that a lot of the Steam reviews for Marathon on Steam are specifically about the Linux and anti-cheat stuff, which is not necessarily a review of the game. I mean, I agree that that game should have fucking Linux support. But at the end of the day, I don't know. That stuff seems a little much at times. I don't know. There's been death threats and all this. I saw some death threats going around to PlayStation employees saying like, it is completely just if we kill these people because they're taking this away from us. It's like at some point like that is actively hurting the cause. You know, if the cause can be written off as these people are insane, then the cause goes away and never gets taken seriously. Not that I think that Sony would ever fucking backtrack on any of this shit to begin with. You know, like even if this is a bigger reaction than they were expecting, which perhaps it is, perhaps they were aware that this would be if they were aware that this was going to be a black cloud over everything they did for a while, then they probably would have stopped posting trailers for indie games and some of that other stuff. They would have kind of, you know, given those developers something else. And perhaps those developers are going to get make goods of some stylings as a result of this bullshit. But I don't know. Like I think a big part of this is like, it remains to be seen how much of this will turn into actual action. You hear anecdotal stuff all the time, and the anecdotal stuff is getting bigger and bigger all the time, where you see people saying like, yeah, I have friends that don't really follow online gaming shit, and so they're not really wrapped up in the day-to-day minutia of these announcements and whatever, but when they catch wind of this no physical disc thing, their reaction is, oh, well, fuck this, I'm out. And that's a pretty, you know, it's an easy thing to say right now in mid-2026. We'll see what happens when we get to a next console, a next game, GTA, you know, like these kind of big moments that people will be put to the test on their resolve around this stuff. And I think that's by design. I think that's why they announced this early, specifically, is because they think that it will be out of the way, kind of done and dusted by the time they have to get out in front of people and say, here's the PlayStation 6. But will those people follow through, I think, is the big question. And that's what Sony is betting on. They're betting on the majority of people going like, whatever. Because the current purchasing patterns indicate that most of those people are buying digital games anyway. And so you see why Sony would feel very comfortable going like, yeah, dude, whatever. Like, yeah, there'll be some people pissed off, but it's such a vocal minority that why would we even, like, whatever, dude. Like, we'll do this, and then, you know, in a year's time or whatever, people will have moved on, and they will be buying PlayStation games again, and they'll forget completely about it. And I bet for the majority of people that will end up being true. But this stuff has, like, longer legs or louder legs than I guess I would have expected. So we'll see. I don't know. Like I said, like this story isn't written. This story can't be written right now, because you have to wait and see what happens on the other side of it. Like once they actually pull the plug on this, will they have seen a significant drain in users over the next year and a half? Will there be a big sea change moment when the PlayStation 6 comes out where people go, nah, I don't want to do this? I would be of the mind that, like, if we have to go digital only, PlayStation would be one of the last places I would want to do that. The PlayStation Store would not be a place I would want to do. Like, that's not where I would want to invest my game purchasing money. All other things being equal, right? Of like, if I had to choose a storefront of the future, an all digital storefront, I don't think PlayStation is the one that I would pick. So, I think that this ends up hurting them in ways that they probably can't fathom just yet. But again, is that number enough to matter? We'll see. Is that number enough? I don't think there's any number that would get them to reverse course. But is the number big enough to where they're forced to figure out something else to get people back on board? Right? Does the number get big enough for them to go, this is a problem? And the solution is not to actually keep making discs because we've already repurposed those factories and like that ship has fucking sailed. So instead we need to do XYZ. Instead we need to revamp our digital storefront and we need to have an even friendlier refund policy. Like that would probably be the sort of stuff that they would do to try to quash this or to try to get people to get on board with it, is like very visibly revamp their digital stuff in ways that seem more consumer friendly. That's my guess for how that stuff unfolds. Because ultimately at the end of the day, for the number of people that are being directly impacted by this, it is a minority of players. And so, again, unless this gets people who are already buying games digitally to wake up one day and go, wait, what the fuck am I doing? I don't think that the damage will be so strong that Sony will be forced to do anything to reverse this. It will just be more work on the other end to get people to feel comfortable with buying things on their storefront. That's the likely approach they'll take. And they'll be safe to do that because I don't think Xbox is going to do a similar thing. Maybe they're investigating that right now, if they could. I don't think it's as huge a win, a huge hearts and minds win as people would think it would be for Microsoft to get out there in a year and a half and say, we're still going to make discs. Because also the Microsoft story and the Microsoft situation is so fucking fucked right now that like, even if they said, we're making discs because we love you, the gamer, Tim Dog was right. I think people would still look at the Xbox situation and go like, yeah, but you were fucked up in 9 other ways. Like you're already like what games are even coming out on these discs? Like, what are we doing? That I just don't think that they would be in a very credible position to reap the full benefit of trying to stick it to Sony on this. It just doesn't seem like a winning strategy because they also, I'm sure, would love to get rid of discs. Third-party publishers would probably love to get away from that shit as well. It changes so many things about how games are past certification and when they have to be certed and all of that other stuff. That I think it probably makes their job a little bit easier to just get games out the door. The cost of goods situation changes, all that other stuff. So, it's a shit situation. It really is. And I think the knock-on effects of this for console, because again, I think it's very easy to lump Xbox into this. And the thing I keep thinking about is, again, that completely broken process of console comes out, early adopters buy it, they buy a bunch of games, generation continues, console gets cheaper, used games are everywhere. Eventually you get that player who didn't buy at the high price, buys at a lower price, buys a bunch of used games, is now in the ecosystem, signs up for the subscription service to play online, buys more games, probably buys a fair number of games digitally because of the convenience, and you get more players into that ecosystem. The hope with the Nintendo Switch was like, oh, okay, we're going to put out the OLED Switch, and then everyone's going to take their Switch, and they're going to hand it to a younger brother or sister, and then we'll have 2 people playing Switch games and buying games. Like, those systems don't just go unused, they get passed down to someone else. Like, that's been a big part of Nintendo's handheld strategy when they issue an update, like, here's the new 3DS, this one's got a fucking right stick that no games will support. And you're like, yeah, give me that. Nothing uses it. It's the best. I'll take my old DS and throw it at a kid randomly on the street. And that whole process is broken for obviously a number of reasons, right? Because the consoles don't get cheaper, everything's just getting more expensive, and like all of that whole chain is broken. And so when you look at how broken that chain is already, before we even get to the lack of physical games, like I think it's very easy, it probably it made the decision for PlayStation probably even easier to just go, yeah, fuck them. Like that consumer doesn't exist anymore because all this shit is too expensive. And I don't know. None of that feels good. Fucking none of that feels good. That said, I don't think that threatening violence and doing all of the other horse shit that people are doing on social media is actually the answer. Surprise, surprise. Especially if people want to look like they're making some kind of coherent case for this stuff and be like reasonable about it. Like when you say they stopped making games on disc and so I threatened to kill some of their employees, like there's no way to make that sound fucking normal and okay. You just can't do it. And it fucking shoots a lot of holes in the much more reasonable arguments that can be made around this. About whether it's consumer rights or consumer choice or what have you. The PC has multiple storefronts on it. Phones don't anymore in some parts of the world. And so you wonder, I feel like the idea of physical games for consoles is the sort of thing that they would be able to wave in front of the EU or some of these other parts of the world that want to regulate that closed ecosystem out of existence and say, whatever, man, the games sell at a variety of prices at a number of retailers around the world. Like, yes, we approve all the games that get pressed to disc and that I'll approve all the games that run on our system. But at the end of the day, we don't control the price. We control the prices on our storefront. And if people want to sell it for cheaper at a fucking Best Buy or whatever, like, go with God. And there are used games and all this other stuff. We don't fully control this ecosystem in a monopolistic like fashion. And I think that that's an argument that I think makes some sense when you remove all of that shit and now you just have a digital store. You're literally recreating the same monopoly that is getting busted up on Apple's App Store and on Google's Google Play stuff. And so if we continue down this road, I do wonder if at some point someone says, hey, you need to allow alternative storefronts on your device. Like the PlayStation 6 cannot be locked down to PSN. It needs to have support for this. It needs to have support for that. Like, they're regulating Android phones to say, hey, we know that Google makes this, but that doesn't mean that you can just force Gemini on everybody. You have to allow third-party AI agents to have equal access to this device, which is, I would prefer to have none of those agents have access, but at the end of the day, I do wonder if this will trigger a situation that really fucks over Sony in a regulatory fashion, and if this does impact Microsoft as well, should they decide to go down the same road. We'll see. You could argue that they are different situations, but I think that, again, once you remove all other options for buying games, the difference between PSN, the difference between the PlayStation Store and Apple's App Store, not that fucking different. So we will see. Yeah, Zorga says, hasn't someone brought it to the EU already? Yes, they did. And the EU basically said, like, well, we can't stop someone from getting out of the physical disc business. That's not where they would step in and regulate. They would not step in and regulate until the monopoly exists, until there's something for them to regulate. They can't get there and say, we're going to force you to keep burning discs. Fuck you. That's overbearing. But I would expect in the parts of the world that are better about consumer rights, meaning not the United States of fuck me, that some parts of the world would take a long fucking look at this once we're on the other side of it and say, hey, you need to start allowing other ways for games to get on your console, which is like worst case scenario for these console makers, the last thing they want is to open up the system. And for Microsoft, that wouldn't be as big of a deal because they would be able to say, well, if you join our developer program, we let people install shit. Like, with a current Xbox, you can install whatever you want on it. And there's a whole way for you to do that without us regulating it in any major way. And that might be a way for them to kind of sidestep some of that stuff. PlayStation does not have a similar thing. But the last thing they would want is another storefront to be able to legally run on their console, because who knows what that storefront would allow. That storefront might say, oh yeah, now we're going to sell signed apps that actually let you install fucking pirated apps from the other thing. And, it opens a bunch of doors that PlayStation does not want opened. And so in some sick way, and I have to imagine they went down this road, they probably thought this through. They're not dumb. They probably looked at the landscape and said, hey, is this going to open us up to this? And they think that they have a good argument to beat it should it come up. But that is what I'm left wondering. Is does this end up fucking Sony over somewhere down the line? Last Claire says, what if this makes Sony make a game key card style solution for the PS6? Sure. Yeah, I mean, the thing that they'll probably say is, well, we're continuing to sell games in stores. They're just serial numbers now. And if that store wants to sell that serial number for $9, we're not going to stop them. And perhaps that is a way for them to kind of skirt around some of that stuff. We'll see, man. I don't know. It potentially just seems like it could be a very fucking nasty can of worms, but again, like the sort of consumer rights stuff that the EU decides to take up and the stuff that they decide to skip, I'm no expert in that stuff. So I'm just kind of walking through the last several years of App Store related lawsuits, Tim Sweeney's Holy Crusade, and thinking about that and how it might apply to consoles in the future. But we will see. If that went bad for PlayStation, they would probably find themselves in a position where it would have been cheaper for them to just keep making the fucking discs, even if no one was buying them, I could see a scenario, like the thing about discs, the way I figured this would go, and the way I think it probably still should go, is I think physical discs should be like vinyl and should be like, it's the boutique small batch stuff that's like, hey, we did a collector's edition of this physical game and it doesn't come out on day one, and it's something that comes out after a game gets all of its patches, and so you can say, here it is, the definitive version of this, and you're gonna get a fucking lithograph to go with it, and it's numbered. Isn't that cool? But when we look at how physical movie stuff, Blu-rays and what have you, the way that stuff gets sold, a model that approaches something more like that, I think, makes a lot of sense, because then you get the people that are like the collectors that want that stuff for whatever weird collector reasons they want it. And it creates a situation where you can say, hey, because this didn't come out on launch day, here's a situation where, the game is not likely to see any more patches after the release of this disc. And so you're truly getting a full version of the game that, depending on the game, is fully able to run offline, and so on and so forth. And so I thought that would be the direction we would go in with this stuff. Because it would keep that market afloat. It would provide people with some high dollar value, high margin, weird collector item. And it would kind of solve that kind of archival problem for some of this stuff. That's what I figured we would get with like an Alan Wake type of situation. Is like, oh, they're eventually going to do, some kind of full, and they did do they did do physical Alan Wake 2 discs at some point, right? I'm not completely high, am I? But like Alan Wake 2 was sort of the thing that I thought of because of the reaction that people had to that based on the way it launched and the deal they signed with Epic and so on. That eventually that would be kind of the way for a lot of physical games to exist. Like they don't ship day one, which again takes a lot of the pressure off the teams that are trying to ship games right down to the wire and get as many fixes in as possible and everything. Day one patch, day two patch, day -2 patch, all of that. And then, you know, the benefit to a publisher on that front also is like you get people to buy it on day one because they want to play the game. And then they go, I also want a physical copy of this game that I can look at on a shelf. And it comes with a cool action figure or whatever. This anime lady is damn near naked. I've got to get this and put it on my shelf next to this disc that I will probably never put in a system, but I've got it just in case. You know what I mean? That always made sense to me. Anyway, that's the news. Wreckreation 2, man. Crazy. Just crazy. Got some new releases coming up this week that'll be pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to playing them as soon as I get some time. Both Splatoon Raiders, which I can't say Splatoon Raiders without almost saying Splatoon Raider. And I think that they should do some kind of crossover. Lara Croft should be a squid and or a kid. That's my feeling on that. And this Halo thing. If you, I guess it's technically not out until next week. But they are doing the thing where if you give them a bunch of, if you don't want to just benefit from your Game Pass subscription, if you want to instead give them $70, they will allow you to start playing Halo Campaign Evolved in a little under 2 days as of this recording. 1 day and 20 hours according to the Steam page. So that is going to be out this week as well. And we'll see. I don't know. That last trailer that they put out for Halo, I thought looked pretty good. All the layoffs, along with some of the layoff news, came some news that, or some form of reporting saying that there was a kind of large-scale Halo multiplayer project that perhaps got killed in and around the sort of layoff window. And so the actual future of Halo still feels like it's in a very strange place. And we'll see how that goes. There was also, some of the Xbox leadership sat down with Games Radar and gave, like, I'd call them ambiguous answers, but also acknowledgement that the answers are too ambiguous about what games are going where. They kind of acknowledged, like, yeah, you know, we want to do more exclusives. There's more news on that front of stuff that'll be console exclusive in the future here. But we don't have anything to say about that right now. And we realize that this is not an ideal way to run this in terms of, like, when we say what games are going where. But, like, their answer to it, I think it was Matt Booty that gave the quote that said, you know, you can expect that when we announce a release date for a game, we will also announce the platforms that it is coming to. I might argue that that is too late in the process and that this needs to be something that happens on the day the game is announced. Not just the day a release date is announced. I think that's kind of silly. I think that seems like it is still a bad way to do this. But hey, Microsoft is inventing brand new ways to find bad ways to do this almost every day. So they'll figure it out sooner or later. At least they acknowledge that this is not a good way to do this. I agree. Let's get into some emails. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. If you want to send me an email, that is where you send it. That is literally the only place to send it. If you send it anywhere else, who knows where it ends up? I won't see it. But if you send it to podcast@guard.bike, chances are I will see it. We've got a handful of email. Wait, why did this break? What happened here? Ben from Minneapolis writes in, hello, Ben, and asks the question, does Parappa the Rapper 2 deserve more appreciation these days? Mr. Hansen, it does. Absolutely. Of course it does. Of fucking course it does. I don't know why. No one talks about Parappa the Rapper 2. Is it as good as Parappa the Rapper 1? No. Is it as good as Jammer Lammy? Also, no. Is that track that happens around the middle of the game with the kind of retro chiptune sort of beats, does it in fact go hard? Yes, it does. Parappa the Rapper 2 is a hell of a game. I think that when you go back to it, and I when this email came in, it sent me down a fucking rabbit hole of like, I went and listened to all of the songs. I didn't go play the game again, but I went and listened to all of the music from Parappa 2. And the problem with Parappa 2 is that the story of like, there's a guy and he really likes noodles and he thinks that everyone should just eat noodles. And so he wants to turn all the food and everything into noodles is not a great premise. And so having a lot of the music in the game wrapped up in this guy's quest for noodles becomes a overbearing weight upon that soundtrack. This is, man, Parappa 2 was, when Parappa 2 got announced, it was extremely exciting to me, a fan of those games. And there was also kind of around this time, there was like a push, and it didn't happen in this country because I think Sony didn't know what they had with Parappa. Also, the stuff with Rodney Greenblatt, I think, went sideways not long after this. I think the story there, I don't want to, speak too out of turn because it's been a long time since I've looked into it, but I think the situation is that Rodney Greenblatt went through a divorce and some of the rights and stuff got in a real weird place for some of this material. And I think that is what prevented a lot of this stuff from happening or more of it happening or whatever. But I believe that was the case. It's been a long time since I've looked into it, so forgive me if I'm a little off base with that, but that is my understanding of how that stuff went. There was a push, or I don't know if this happened organically or whatever, but like they put out a fucking mixtape. They put an album out in Japan that's like, it's got De La Soul on it. It's DJ Kaori, I think is her name. She put it together. But like there's the track is called Say I Gotta Believe, and they made a music video for it and all this other stuff. And then so that was kind of like the lead track on this mixtape, and the rest of it was kind of, some other material that was not as interesting as that. But Parappa the Party Mix, Tommy Boy put it out, and it's got it's got Keeping the Faith by De La Soul, like Fantastic Voyage by Coolio is on it, the Queen Latifah is on it. It's a mixtape, but it has this track at the front of it that is the kind of promotional Parappa 2 track. And it really felt like this moment of like, oh dude, this is like some actual legitimate crossover between Parappa and like legit real hip hop. The weird thing about Parappa early on is that, I like hip hop out of Japan. I really do. It's got such a different thing going for it, but Japan's love of hip hop is always, there's whatever. I'm sure there are documentaries you could find about that and some of the occasionally problematic ways that stuff surfaces. But the idea of real ass genuine hip hop artists getting involved with Parappa, I think this thing they did promotionally for Parappa 2 is something that they absolutely positively should have followed up on. Like, there should have been a Parappa 3 where Parappa is rapping, like all of the fucking teachers are just like, here's Pharaoh Monch and Parappa, and Pharaoh is like, throw your hands up, and then Parappa says, throw my hands up. Like, there's a lot they could have done. If this had continued to blossom and continue to develop, I think that there's like a whole lot of cool shit that could have been done here that they just pissed away. And again, I think some of that is because of the stuff with Rodney Greenblatt, who's the illustrator who kind of came up with the whole thing to begin with, and everything else. And so Parappa 2, I think the game doesn't necessarily reflect this, but the point at which it came out and some of the promotional stuff that happened around it felt like it could have been turned into something so much more. Parappa 2 as a game, I think, is good. It is the worst one of those three. Parappa 1 is better. Jammer Lammy is better. But it is still a solid video game in that format. And again, I think if they had gotten to make another one, if they had been able to just like capitalize on what they had going here and said, okay, now we're going to have fucking Parappa and Humpty Hump. I'm saying that because Digital Underground was a Tommy Boy artist, and all these Tommy Boy artists are on this mixtape because they're the ones that put this out. But you get my meaning here. There's a lot that they could have done. That was something I when I saw them perform live, it was a really kind of mind-blowing experience seeing, because they had, like all of the voice actors and performers that did the voices in the game on stage rapping and singing those songs. And it was super impressive in a way that like you just don't expect, because you're just like, you think of it and go like, oh, well, these are the guys that did the voice for the game, but there's no way they could ever reproduce that. But like, they were all musicians and they could all perform. Generally, I mean, the voice of like Katy Cat and the voice of Parappa. I think my understanding, again, it's been a long time, so forgive me if I'm getting some of this wrong, but I also remember hearing that the voice of Parappa maybe scammed some people online at one point. Or am I thinking of the voice of Knuckles? Anyway, Parappa 2 is solid for what it is, and I think it deserves more respect than it gets. It is kind of the forgotten. It is kind of the forgotten game out of that trilogy. But it was an absolutely solid entry that is probably worth going back to. I mean, it gets harder all the time, right? Because latency is what it is, and it can be hard to revisit some of those older rhythm games these days. Yes, okay. It was indeed the was his name Dred Scott? I think it was his name. I'm clicking on this story. Yes, Dred Fox, which is way better. Yes, he apparently agreed to, this is from n4g.com via Pat Bear. Dred Fox, who voiced the titular character, has allegedly agreed in late 2012 to record 10 lines of dialogue in his Parappa voice for a fan-made animation project. They agreed to pay him $100, but several months. Okay, so like this whole story is over $100 and a fan animation. So it's just like, all right. And then they threatened legal action over that $100. Yeah. So okay. But I remember he was on like, or that, I mean, 2012. I hesitate to even call it social media back then, but was that like, he was like, I think the story even mentioned it, but he was like also like asking a bunch of people for money at the time and like capitalizing off of his like Parappa fame in sort of a weird way, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, I do, to answer your actual question, Ben, it deserves more appreciation these days for sure. Parappa 2. There's nothing wrong with it, other than maybe the kind of noodle heavy content of that game wears out its welcome a little bit before the story is over. But yeah, that game was absolutely fine. Let's see here. Steve from Kalamazoo writes in, this is kind of a long one. I'll see if I can boil it down. I just watched David Jaffe talk about how he helped contribute to the demise of AAA narrative games because he and his peers thought too highly of their cultural influence and tried to make video games into Hollywood. He used Roblox as an example of video game success because it has, quote, no narrative. I feel like older guys always talk about Roblox without really understanding why kids like it. It's not the lack of narrative. Some Roblox games have stories and lore that kids really get into. They like when there's creepy backstory and Easter eggs to reveal the narrative over multiple plays. Kids like Roblox simply because it's free, easy to meet with friends, and there's a never-ending list of games to try, so on and so forth. Isn't it more likely the drive for higher fidelity graphics and massive open worlds slowed down the release of AAA games, and that puts studios in a tough position of not having steady release schedules? These narrative games also reached for the most realistic looking graphics. Roblox kids enjoy story and will enjoy narrative games as they get older. They just need someone to make good games that don't waste years perfecting the bottom of Spider-Man's shoes. Yeah, I think that's way off base. Yes, I think that the idea that like, big games failed because they had narrative, like, no. And Roblox's success is not due to it having no narrative. There are plenty of examples of popular games that don't have like massive woven in narratives. I mean, all the multiplayer games that are popular, don't always have the deepest thing going on. But at the same time, look at some of those forever games. Like Fortnite, in the context of a Fortnite match, you're not necessarily getting a lot of story. You're just the last one standing. But like, they have these massive season-ending events that are in-game that attract millions of people. They have, like, there is a ongoing narrative that is part of Fortnite's success. I don't know that people necessarily play Fortnite for it, but they show up for it, and they like it. There are a lot of people that follow that stuff to some degree. Overwatch was a narrative thing that got turned into a competitive shooter, but they still are able to capitalize on that lore, the state of that world, and all of that sort of stuff. And so, like, I refuse to believe that narrative doesn't matter to those audiences. And as you say, I mean, shit, dude. Look at the success of Five Nights at Freddy's and all of the knockoffs of it that show up in Roblox. They were able to turn Five Nights at Freddy's into a, series of films and other media and all of this other stuff. Like, they wouldn't be able to do that if no one cared about it. Minecraft, classically, you think about Minecraft as not having a built-in narrative. They sure as fuck did make a popular movie out of it. So, yeah, not all of these games are super lore heavy, but they have the right amount of premise and the right amount of lore to make that stuff work. And the kids respond to that and care about it. They want to know the hows and whys of that world. That's something, with my own kids, they are always asking questions as to, hey, why? Why does this happen? They are always asking why about everything, because that's what all kids do until it makes you crazy, and then they keep doing it. But they want to know the story behind this. They want to know, hey, why did they choose to do this? Why does this like this? Why is this the way it is? Like, they are constantly curious about that sort of stuff, and that is the sort of stuff that narrative can address. So, no, I don't think that David Jaffe killed AAA games because he wanted to have stories in them. That's preposterous. And I think that, Steve, your reasoning for, like, yeah, man, these games just got more expensive to produce, and they're games that are one and done purchases in an industry that increasingly wants to sell you cosmetics and skins and, whether it's season passes or, like, here's a fucking cool hat, like, competitive and multiplayer games are easier to monetize in that way. Why do we see live service games? Why do we see a push away from narrative focused games? It's not out of some like, oh, we've got to get the narrative out of here because like it's too woke, whatever fucking insane shit. It's because some of that stuff just monetizes better. And in some cases can be a little bit less expensive to make because you're not making big dramatic set piece cutscenes and all this other stuff, That stuff has its place, and there's an audience of fans that love, obviously, like Uncharted is not an unpopular franchise. The Last of Us turned into a fucking television show, and it's full of all of that bespoke shit. Super expensive. Even games where the cutscenes are just, here's a fucking guy standing here in front of your face with a dialogue tree. Fallout was able to be turned into a successful television franchise, Obviously that's not something that like kids are super into. Kids are not fucking dying to play the next Fallout. But I think that like I also agree that there is a genuine lack of understanding about what Roblox is and what Roblox does. From a lot of adults, parents, a lot of people, not just people in the video game industry. Like there are plenty of people in the video game industry that have never touched Roblox and don't really understand what they're looking at or what they're facing off against, if you will. There are a lot of people that have not sunk into it and really seen what the fuck that thing is. And that has been, I think in a lot of ways for me personally, one of the most productive things I have done over this last 12 months or whatever was to spend too much time staring at Roblox and to really get a sense of like, here's what this thing is all about. And yeah, there are plenty of games that inside of Roblox that are popular that do try to deliver some kind of narrative. It is not the deepest. It is not the most well produced. It is not some big AAA endeavor. But like, I mean, the whole popularity of horror games, so much of that is based around people caring about individual characters or individual parts of this narrative or this world. Even if the games are multiplayer in nature, there's still a lot of stuff going on that helps you attach to that universe in a deeper way. So yeah, I don't know that I would agree. And I didn't see the piece in question, so hopefully I'm not misrepresenting what Mr. Jaffe said too much here. But based on what you're saying, if he's, if the idea is that, well, what you wrote here, that he helped, he says he helped contribute to the demise of AAA narrative games because he and his peers thought too highly of their cultural influence and tried to make video games into Hollywood. I don't think that that's the case. Like, yes, games got more cinematic and they're still there. Like, those games didn't go away. Those games didn't fail. Those games still exist. And they just got more and more expensive. If anything, that's the actual problem here. It's also not the first time that Hollywood was to blame for dumb shit in video games, Like, I think, in the years before Jaffe got his start, I mean, we were going through, or maybe he was working somewhere at this point. I'm not exactly familiar with when he started, but, remember, we had to deal with the multimedia CD-ROM era. We had to deal with Dennis Hopper in Hell. We had to deal with Burn Cycle. We had to deal with, here's Tia Carrere. Here's here's David Bowie in Omnicron. You had to deal with years and years of people trying to force either full motion video or, Sillywood, the Silicon Valley meets Hollywood horse shit. that everyone was trying to push upon us in the early 90s. And so, you know, it's not the first time that Hollywood has been a factor here, and people go like, this is gaming's gone off the fucking rails. This stuff's bad. Like, you know, like it's yeah. I would not agree with that conceptually. Aiden writes in with a tech question. How to get started with upscalers. I'm a bit of a bozo when it comes to retro tech. Recently got a PlayStation 2 and a GameCube with composite connections only. The only TV I currently have is a modern smart TV that does have composite ports, but not component. When I'm playing, I do notice a bit of input lag. What exactly does an upscaler do? Which ones would you recommend? Do I need to get component cables to use the upscalers? Also, do I need one of these for the Wii, or really just PS2 and GameCube and before? So the idea with an upscaler is that it is something that is converting whatever connection you've got into HDMI that you can plug into your TV directly. And it is able to do some processing to the image to have it scale up to 4K in a friendlier, nicer way. Ideally at the lowest latency possible. I have a RetroTink 4K. It's a wonderful device. It continually gets firmware updates that add fucking really interesting new features to it. And it's been fantastic. There are plenty of other devices in this space. I've heard nice things about, what is it? It's the Pixel FX Morph. Is that what it is? The Morph 4K. I've heard that that's a pretty nice device as well for some of this stuff. And it is, if I am remembering correctly, not quite as expensive as the RetroTink. And so, but I have not seen one of those for myself. And so the idea here is, and so you ask, like, you know, do you just need component cables to use the upscalers? In a general rule of thumb here, what you put in, the better quality you can put into this thing, the better quality you will get out. Now, there are limitations to that. I'm currently using the RetroTink with a Nintendo 64. I'm using S-Video, which is the highest quality you can get out of an N64 without modifying the console to have a straight up RGB out. Now, I could do that. I could get a modded console and have it output different video, and I would benefit from that in theory. But the difference between the S-Video cable that I'm currently using and that RGB mod sounds like it is extremely minor. And I watched some kind of comparison footage to look at it for myself and went like, yeah, I don't think I need to do this. You can upgrade consoles to do that RGB out, and then you can use SCART cables. You can get into the wonderful world of SCART cables. And a lot of these devices, the RetroTink, of course, being one of them, it has a SCART port on it, and you just plug that crazy looking cable in there, and that is going to give you, you know, well, it can give you any different types of output depending on what it's plugged into. But I have a modded PC Engine Turbo Duo R that has RGB out on it that takes a SCART cable, and it looks wonderful. It looks fantastic. It is akin to emulating the thing and you know, having clean footage come out of a modern console or out of a modern PC or what have you. It looks that clean, even though it is technically an analog signal. And so then you're piping that into something like the RetroTink, which is able to take that image, scale it to 4K in the nicest way possible, and you have some control over that if you want to get fiddly, even more fiddly, I guess. And then it'll spit it out to your TV at a very low latency. You can also just go get HDMI adapters off of like fucking Amazon for like $9 or whatever. There are plenty of little boxes that will take a component cable and spit out HDMI, but your mileage may vary. In terms of how much latency do these things introduce? Are these things built for low latency? Odds are they are not. And so if you're already noticing latency plugging directly into the TV, if you're capable of noticing that sort of latency, I would argue in favor of getting a dedicated device that is built for this shit. It's a rabbit hole, man. You start investigating cables and you hear about the different cable manufacturers and you're like, oh, these guys make nice cables. This place makes way worse cables. There's cheap cables on Amazon that are actually usually as good as the ones that you can get for way more money, but sometimes they're bad. This cable company is apparently run by fascists. Like, there's just a bunch of weird shit out there in this fucking world. So be ready for that. Be ready to go down that rabbit hole, I guess, if you want to do this. There are lower end RetroTinks that are not as cheap, not as expensive as the RetroTink 4K. There's like the 5X Pro that is a nice device that I think is, I want to say that tops out at 1440p. There's also a discounted or a less expensive edition of the RetroTink 4K that has a bunch of features stripped out of it. You can get the open source scaler. I forget what the actual. You can get an OSSC Pro if you want to go down that road that way, and then you can get all sorts of weird GSW. You know, you get all that. Like, hey, now I want to hook up 30 consoles at the same time. What do I do with that? And they will sell you a big block of SCART ports that you can just plug into your scaler and then plug 12 consoles into it and fucking go crazy and lose your goddamn mind. Take your FrameMeister and throw it in the garbage. We're beyond that now. It's a whole thing, man. It's a you can really you can really go bananas. You too could be the guy that has like the shelf with cubby hole shelves, and on each one is a different console, and you've put like colored lighting behind them that matches what you perceive to be the right color for that console. You've got your Nintendos in a nice red. You got your Dreamcast in like a blue because you keep it British. You know, there's a lot of road there if you want to be absolutely insane about it. And so I have not tried a lot of the different devices in this space. I bought a RetroTink 4K, and I think it's an incredible fucking device. As someone who used a FrameMeister and used an OSSC Pro and some of the other devices kind of prior to that, I've not tried any of Pixel FX's stuff. But again, I've heard good things about it at the price. This RetroTink 4K is fucking mind-blowing. But the thing that pushed me over the edge on it, I was looking at it and going like, this seems like something I should get into. But I don't know why. And then they added specific support for the Mister, to where you could plug a Mister into it and it would scale that up to 4K at a very low latency, and also would use analog video out, which the Mister is capable of doing. And there are benefits to that in terms of latency, and it will automatically detect what you're running. And so when you run a core on the Mister, the RetroTink will pick that up and automatically load a profile that turns on the exact right shaders, the exact right scan lines. I guess they're not shaders. And we'll crop the image exactly correctly, and you just, boom, you're ready to fucking play. Instead of you getting the remote, which I have right here, and going, okay, I need to open this menu, I need to browse to a profile, I want to use this CRT thing and do this, and I want to turn on these scan lines, and like, no, it'll just fucking automatically do it. It's fucking rad. But again, like this stuff is not cheap. I don't remember exactly how much a RetroTink 4K is. I want to say it's like $700 or something, but let me look. $750 for the RetroTink 4K Pro. For me, that was worth it. For me, just even just I'm mostly using it for the Mister, and it's been great for that. It has been amazing for this N64 stuff. I've hooked up a Saturn. I've hooked up a what else? I had a 3DO hooked up to it for a while. It's got S-Video. It's got component. Like, it has basically all the connectors you would want. And then if you want to get crazy, you can start buying external switches so you can plug in, again, 50 devices at once and be a true fucking maniac. Don't fucking do it. Don't be that. You don't need to do this. But it'd be kind of cool if you just had all those systems there and you could push a button and kind of have it work. Especially if you had flash carts and ODEs and all those things. Oof. Oof. You could spend a fucking infinite amount of money on this shit if you wanted to. I cannot recommend you do that. But it would be pretty neat. The kind of slightly lower end RetroTink 4K is $475. If the features, it reduces the feature set in a way that does not fit my specific needs, but may fit yours. I guess I would say about the 4K CE. I forget what it was now, but there were like 2 or 3 features that are exclusive to the Pro because it has I guess the CE has a smaller FPGA in it. But there was stuff that was reduced there that I was like, oh, well, I'm glad I bought the big one because this meets my needs precisely. And it's real nice. But I don't have the room for it. I have the consoles, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to fucking set up 50 consoles all at once. However, every time I look at the Switch, the big row of SCART connectors that they sell, that you could just take that, plug it into the RetroTink, and it'll also like, dude, so you could get this thing that, and this is the thing, you hook all the consoles up into this big switch, SCART cables, whatever you got, you can kind of pick and choose. And then you can hook that up to the RetroTink directly with one video cable, but also another kind of data cable that sets it so when you push a button to choose what console you want to play, it sends that information to the RetroTink, and then that operates similarly to the Mister, where it goes, okay, you're running this, and it needs to look like this and do this. Fucking bananas, dude. It's just awesome. I'm not going to do that. I don't have the space for it. Or the desire. The reason I bought this is because I like the Mister, and the Mister has solved so many of these problems already. Why would I hook up a Super Nintendo in 2026? You know? When the Mister does that already. I'm not going to do it. Rory writes in with an email titled, Pal World bigger than Counter-Strike? And sent along an image of, I guess, a news headline somewhere noting that, so the 1.0 release of Pal World hit recently and it led to a big spike in players, which led to this headline, Pal World 1.0 briefly overtook the king of Steam, Counter-Strike 2, and the devs can't help but bask in the victory. Quote, let me enjoy this moment for just a little longer. So Pal World has proven to continue to be popular with that 1.0 release. And so that led Rory C to send in this question. All Nintendo had to do was make a good Pokemon game, but instead they make the same game with the same battle system repeatedly for like 30 years. Is this a learning moment for Nintendo? What will the future of Pokemon games look like after this? Will they have to look at Pal World and try and adopt a few systems like guns? All they had to do was give Pikachu a gun, and they could have been bigger than Counter-Strike. Yeah, you're right, man. That Pokemon franchise is fucked. No one buys those games, right? No one's buying Pokemon games. That shit's just, yeah, I mean, everyone thinks those games are garbage and no one purchases them, right? Pretty sure Pokemon is already a larger franchise than Counter-Strike 2 and Pal World combined, Rory. But thank you for your email. Next question. Ian from the north in the United Kingdom writes in, I don't know. This is almost, is it just me? Or was Optimus Rhyme the best nerdcore act by fucking miles? They had dope instrumentations and nice bars with subject matter other than video games. Really feel like they had the X factor required to break out if they'd stuck at it. I still ride for them, but there's not much info on what happened, presumably life. Seems to me you were pretty in the trenches with this. Can you share your scene highlights and reflections? And what, if anything, does modern society owe to nerdcore hip-hop? Oh, man. I don't like the term. I think most of the acts that would be considered nerdcore, I think most of the hip hop that is and I almost want to use air quotes there. Most of the people that have rapped at PAX are not people I want to listen to. There are exceptions. I think Mega Ran is extremely fucking talented. There are people in chat that don't know what nerdcore means, which is funny, which is great. Oh, which is good, actually. Nerdcore is kind of the label given to a bunch of shitty fucking rap about video games and comic books or whatever. You could put MC Chris into that bucket. I think MC Chris did really well at that. MC Chris has a new record, I think, out like soon-ish, if it's not out already. But I think that my main problem with a lot of, and I've heard some Optimus Rhyme in the past, but I don't have any specific memories of anything that they ever put out, so I can't really speak to them directly. But when it comes to this sort of stuff, and this is like my feelings about like Lonely Island and like comedy rap as well. I want people that are doing this to have like a genuine and real appreciation for hip hop. And I think when they have that and that shines through, when I think there is a genuine love for it, I think that stuff can work. I think when you're just like, we thought it would be funny because we can sort of rap, and then I don't know, we're going to rap about Star Wars or, you know, Dark Souls or whatever. And it just, you can tell from listening to it that these people have fucking no idea what they're doing. There's no flow to it. They're just writing the fucking dumbest fucking rhymes, and they're like, it's just funny, man. I think that shit is the fucking worst. It's like exploitative at some point. You know, it's just like on both ends of it. It is exploiting both black culture and like fucking nerd culture. It's like one of those is worse than the others. Don't get me wrong, but it just feels like the fucking lowest common denominator, fucking just the wackest shit you could fucking do. Just the fucking worst. And so I don't know, like I would not consider myself to be in the trenches with that, but I was there when it was happening and heard way more of it than I wish I did, I guess. But yeah, I think my argument there, or my problem there, is I think a lot of people come at that from like having no real care or any kind of interest in hip hop, and they just are rapping because they've discovered that they sort of could, and they're just like this like ironic fucking smarmy smug bullshit that I think a lot of these guys did is just fucking pathetic. And again, I'm not saying anything specific about Optimus Rhyme or you know, I don't remember what they specifically put out. But I think there's a lot of shit there that's been out there over the years that has really fucking sucked. Really fucking sucked. I think it was one of the things that I think set MC Chris apart is that he had a skill for it. He had a knack for it. And it wasn't just like, now I'm going to write a song about Dungeons and Dragons. Now I'm going to write a song about this. I mean, he did have an album called Dungeon Master of Ceremonies. Don't get me wrong. Like there was aspects of it that for sure, but a lot of that felt like it was coming from a more genuine place about like, this is who he is. I think there was an authenticity to it. And I think that's what a lot of this other stuff lacks. They're not authentic to caring about hip hop. They are not authentic to like trying to fucking do whatever their kind of nerdcore-ish sort of thing. And just none of it fucking works for me. And again, most comedy rap, I think, falls into the same bucket. I said it not that long ago on this very show, but like, it's one of the reasons why Lonely Island works as well as it does is because they fucking give a shit about it. And they're fucking good at it. And there is there's influences there. When you listen to the music they put out, you go like, oh yeah, these guys are from the Bay. Okay. Oh yeah. You can kind of tell there's stuff here. You hear like, oh yeah. Huh. Right on. And I think that's the only way you can do that and get away with it. Was I a Flight of the Conchords person? Fucking absolutely fucking not. No. About his fucking... I don't know how fucking... Absolutely fucking not. Man, holy shit. No fucking thank you. I don't like Hamilton for much of the same reason, if you want to fucking get into it. Holy shit. Oh my god. Anyway, yeah, I think that a lot of that, like, whatever you want to call it as a scene or whatever you want to say about the nerdcore stuff, I think the vast majority of it was embarrassing at the time, and I can't imagine it aged especially well either. But I think that there were, even back then, it was very clear that there were some artists that were doing it because they had a genuine love for this shit. And there were people that didn't, and they were coming at it like that they were more, I don't know. I was going to say they come at it like comedians, but I think that's disparaging to actual fucking comedians to say that also. So, it's a tricky balance. Authenticity always is, a very tricky balance. Let's see. Adam writes in and wants to know about arcade releases. What were new arcade releases like? Was there any fanfare or build up to new cabinets being released? Were there any consumer magazines reviewing and talking about new arcade games? I was 8 when Mortal Kombat came out, and that was the first time I remember there being a significant buzz and word of mouth about a new arcade release. Yeah. It's that is kind of when that happened, like that era of Mortal Kombat coming to arcades in a lot of ways is when that became a thing. Much like video games in the 80s didn't always have set release dates, and it was more like whenever the cartridges showed up at the store, that's when it was out. Distribution for that stuff was not locked down. Distribution for arcade games was even weirder. And you didn't know because arcades didn't advertise it. They didn't say, hey, come back Tuesday, we're going to have Mortal Kombat 3 here. They probably should have if they knew that it was coming, but maybe, I don't know, maybe arcade operators didn't know when the machines were getting there, when the truck was going to show up or whatever it was. But yeah, that sort of stuff didn't really exist. And EGM did some arcade coverage for sure, especially in that era of fighting games. They would put Street Fighter on. I mean, I don't know. There's like the running joke of like how many times Street Fighter 2 was on the cover of EGM. And then in months that it wasn't Street Fighter, it was Mortal Kombat, and then eventually Tekken. And, but like in that era, you certainly had a lot of coverage of those games, but it wasn't really about like, hey, this game's, coming out tomorrow. There was no release date attached to it. Even when you had pre-release coverage of like Mortal Kombat 3 and some of this other stuff, which, you know, they showed off some of those games pre-release. Like I went to Reno to play Mortal Kombat 3 before it came out, when it was, I believe that was its first public showing at the Acme show. I believe that was Acme, not AMOA. But yeah, there wasn't really a lot of, and Mortal Kombat 3, they actually had ads for it. And that was one of the first times I can remember there being ads for arcade machines. It is not the first time. If you go back, there are some ads for arcade games that showed up back in the 80s that are wild to see now, because there's like, what the like, where did these run? What happened? Where would you have seen this? But it did exist. But Mortal Kombat 3, they had a whole marketing campaign around the arcade version, because remember, they had combat codes where you would push buttons and be able to disable throws or make it so Shao Kahn laughed every time somebody got uppercutted, or, you know, whatever. Infinite run, like the different codes you could do with the versus screen. And so the marketing campaign was built around codes and secrets. And so they did a thing there where, and it took people a while to decipher what the fuck it was all about, but they would run these ads that would have a combat code, which was a 6-character string of like icons, like it would be like Goro and the number 3, and, you know, some other little pictures that you could pick through there. And in all the ads, one of the 6 symbols would be missing. So that then, for you to figure out what the combat code was, you might have to play that game as many as 10 times, trying different random, you know, because there was only 10 different numbers there. But the thing they did that people didn't pick up on for a while is, instead of like just having a blank there, they would write like, it was a circle and it would say like number 4. I'm like, why does that say number 4? Is this combat code number 4? What does it mean? So whenever you would lose at Mortal Kombat 3, a bigger combat code, the ultimate combat code, would appear. And that was 10 characters long. And so eventually people realized that the number 4 in the ad meant that whatever symbol completed that short combat code was also used in the ultimate combat code. And so if you eventually figured out the full character string of the ultimate combat code, it would unlock a character. And so in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, they raised the stakes on that and had 3 separate characters, 3 separate combat codes to unlock, what is it? Classic Sub-Zero, Ermac, and Melina, I believe. I forget what it unlocked in the original. Was it Smoke? It was Smoke. It unlocked Robot Smoke in original MK3. And so it was this marketing campaign that was actually genius, because it was built around mystery and codes, which was a thing that defined Mortal Kombat 2's entire existence online. You know, internet coverage of games was very nascent at the time, but you could go on Usenet, you could go on alt.games.mk, and people were like, I think this fatality is this. I think you go here and you hold this and do this. And people were blazing through the game trying to figure out the different fatalities and all this other shit, such that in the later revisions of MK2, they said, fuck you, and they changed all the motions for all the fatalities. So people had to do it all over again. It's fucked. It was a fucked thing they did. But it led to them seeing that fervor around MK2 and building a whole campaign around it for MK3. And that is the most I can remember in terms of like marketing an actual arcade release of a game, is that ad campaign specifically. And it was pretty cool for what they did. But yeah, there was no like release date or whatever, because all those machines had to sit on trucks and be driven across the country. And, you know, it's like they made them all in Chicago and then they all had to just get out from there. And so however long the truck took, that's when the game came out, right? And then you had, you know, different revision updates and all this other stuff where it's like, okay, like Mortal Kombat 4 shipped without endings, which is also dumb. And they eventually added all of that stuff in with revisions. They would, you know, they're sending ships to arcades arcade operators are opening up their machines and carefully lifting chips out and trying not to break them and putting new chips in and going, I don't know. And that became part of the overall appeal of the game, of the marketing. You'd go to arcades and you would turn a machine off and on again to watch it boot up to see, is this revision 2.0 or is this 2.1? What do we have here? Because a lot of times the games didn't advertise it in very clean ways. And so, word of mouth would spread like, oh, the fucking Golfland's got the new revision. We need to go there right now. Get in the fucking car. We're going. That's kind of a byproduct of them updating the game that turned into a weird kind of marketing sort of thing that specifically Midway benefited from, Williams, if you will, in the whole updating of that game and the fervor that created was taken largely as a positive. But when you think about it, they were shipping unfinished games to arcades. It's like the first revisions of MK2 and MK3 and MK4 are kind of fucked. With MK1 actually, the very first revisions of Mortal Kombat 1 are real crazy too, specifically because it had just like balance issues and a lot of really wild shit. But it's just a conceptually very strange thing. But yeah, there was no machine in place to promote the release of arcade games. There still isn't. I don't know. Frank Howley I was in his Twitch chat last night. He said that there's a Sonic the Hedgehog pinball machine in Van Nuys. And I was like, oh shit, I should probably go see that. And then I realized I have no way I'll have to ask him, but I have no idea to figure out where it is. Like pinball machines specifically started solving that problem because you would go to their website or the other people would run websites and say, here's where these machines are. And I assume that there is some information out there about where this Sonic machine is. I want to see it because Steve Ritchie designed it. And also apparently fucking, like I was reading the page for it last night. It says it has music from Sonic Generations and guitar solos from Slash, which is fucking crazy. The idea of Slash shredding for a fucking Sonic pinball game seems like a real fucking dumb thing. I mean, I could always just fucking drop 15 grand and buy one, right? No, don't do that. I'd be better off getting the fucking SCART switcher and setting up the shelf of fucking machines than buying a fucking pinball machine. Jesus. Let's see if we can take a couple more questions here. James from Queens asking about game review scores. Have game review scores always centered around the idea that 7 is okay? Were there ever times when there was an effort at a publication to try and standardize more or move the norm up or down a bit? So I think the idea that 7 is the average score for a video game, the way we kind of talked about it internally at GameSpot back in the day, and I think this was even in something when we wrote an article about our review guidelines and said, here's how we review things. It is that kind of general idea that like 7 might be the average, but also the average is pretty good. At the time, there were not that many fucking busted, terrible video games going to shelves. And when those games did, they would get scored appropriately. They'd be getting 4s, 3s, 2s, And so most games that were making their way onto shelves that had an effort put into them were not 5s, but there was room on the scale for those games. And so the idea was that it's like, the average game that comes out is like, it's okay. It's like, it looks fine. It sounds good. By the component score definition, the stuff kind of comes out to a 7. And this game's all right. That's sort of how that worked. I think you could argue that like your score for sort of all right should be maybe a little closer to the middle of the scale, but what under the 7s we wrote the word good, under the 6s we wrote the word mediocre, And I think under 5s we wrote, I think that's where we might have written average. But, you know, average in average, you know, derogatory, if you know what I mean. I don't think we used average because that actually sounds too confusing now that I say it out loud. It might have been fair or something to that degree. But it was the idea that like the average game that makes its way out the shelves was pretty good. And it just sort of worked out that way. But it was never by design. We were not sitting there going like, you know, this game needs to get a 7 because that's the normal, like it was never how we thought of it as we were scoring games. And it's one of those things that I think makes sense if you're internal and you're staring at that scoring system every day and working with it and going like, yeah, this is how it works. We never thought about it like it was school grades or anything weird like that. It was never like, well, that's a C. We never made that sort of equation to it, and thought about it in terms of like, well, an 80, that's a B, or that's an A, or, you know, it was never, we never, ever thought about the way that schools graded things when it came to that. It was just kind of natural. You know, you would go through this process of rating these games on this scale and this weighted formula, and more often than not, you would end up getting 7s. Because the average game coming out looked fine. It sounded fine. It wasn't extraordinary. But it's like, yeah, no, this sounds about right. This is good for the genre, for the console, for whatever. Yeah, this is all right. It's not bad. It's pretty good. And that's kind of how that stuff sort of happened. But it's part of why I wanted to get away from that scoring system, is because I think it did sort of pigeonhole us into certain scores showing up more often than others. The 8.6 showed up on the GameSpot scale a whole lot just because of the way the math worked out a lot of time. You would get a lot of 8.3s, a lot of 8.6s, not as many 8.5s, just because the math rarely, you know, worked in that specific way. And so part of redesigning GameSpot's scoring system was really about putting the number back in the hands of the reviewer directly and saying, put a number on this, and then we'll discuss it, and maybe we'll bring it up a half point or down a half point or whatever as we figure this out. I wanted to go further, and then later, you know, I would, when I, you know, was building a website all over again, I was able to go further. But at the time, going further, going to a 4-star system or a 5-star system would have broken too many of the old reviews. And so it made sense to like, okay, we're going to try to stick to something that at least resembles something that the old reviews can still kind of cram into. And so we'll change it, but we're not going to change it as dramatically as maybe we could. And so that's why I became a believer in the 5-star scale. You could argue that really all you really need is 3. You know, 4 is, you know, is 4 stars better than 5 stars? Maybe. A scoring system should be something that assists reviewers. I don't want to say force. It should assist reviewers into taking a stand and saying, this is what this game is. And so the thing you're doing when you're designing these systems is to make it as difficult to weasel out of as possible. You don't want a reviewer to give a wishy-washy like, it's like a 3.5, it's like a this, it's, you know, to have this sort of ultimate wiggle room that lets them write reviews that say nothing. And so that's why you go with fewer options. That's why you compress out the half stars, the 10-point scale, it's why you get away from all of that bullshit. Is because the idea is that you want your reviewers to convey genuine information to the audience as directly and as usefully as possible. And so if they end up going like, yeah, it's in the middle somewhere, that does nothing for anyone. It's pointless. It's kind of the benefit of like a 4-star system might have been better than 5 to go full Ebert, because then there's no middle. You know? You're either a 2-star or a 3-star, and the gulf between those is fucking massive. You know what I mean? But the thing I always thought was like that you could really pare this down to 3, and you really get your kind of like, and this 3 does have a middle, because I think there is a wide middle in video games. You get your kind of like green light, yellow light, red light. You get your like thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, middling. This game is mediocre. It becomes, I recommend this game. I don't recommend this game. I recommend this game with some caveats, right? You're kind of 3 different takes on a game. I think philosophically, that is the only way to do this. And if you're not going to do that, you should probably just take scores off the reviews completely. Because again, you know, if you're building a system that specifically gives reviewers too much wiggle room, they will fucking fail to take a stand on anything. At the end of the day, I watched it happen, and so yeah, I think a big part of that is like let's make sure that this content is as useful as possible, and that we're saying something with every part of it. And trying to build a system around that. So yeah, but it's never, there was never like a thought of like 7 is the average or all these, you know, it was more just a byproduct of the math, a byproduct of the weighted formula that GameSpot used back in the day. Is like, yeah, I don't know, like this game is not fun to play, but the graphics and sound are really good. And so, you know, that outweighs this, that outweighs with this. And then you magically end up with something between a 6.8 and a 7.6. You're like, oh, I don't know. And that's accurate, but it's not interesting, and it's not helpful to an audience, which is why, you know, it makes sense to get away from that. So, you know, we kind of ended up there in the right way, with our hearts in the right place, I would say, but it was just never. Again, it outlived its usefulness. Every review we wrote, every year that GameSpot continued to exist, that we were writing reviews with that formula, with that weighted formula of the 5 categories, we saw more and more of it. You started to see, again, like there were just numbers that came up more often than others because of the way the numbers rounded out, and because of the way, you know, video games tended to release. You ended up with more 8.6s, you ended up with more 7.2s, you know, like there was just like a handful of numbers that came up more often than not. And as you've gone 10 plus years, you know, which is, I think we were around for about a decade when I finally started making those changes. You see all the holes in it. You see all the problems with that system. And, you know, I had also had dealt with years of people misinterpreting the system in some of these ways. And it's like, okay, is there a way for us to help people? Like, we know, you know, like we know where the system came from. We know why it exists. We know why it makes sense or whatever, but it doesn't matter. If we can sit here and like slap each other on the back and go like, this review system works great, but like people are confused out there all day long, it sucks. It's a bad system. The idea is that you want to make something that like people can fucking look at and know exactly what you're saying, and that's it. Impossible to misinterpret. Dumbing it down, if you will. Because ultimately the questions like this of like, oh, all these games get 7s or all this, it's like, again, I can tell you the reasons why we did it. I can tell you the reasons why it was not a problem, but the fact that you noticed it means that the system is not working as well as it should. And it became like a really good reason to change it. So I don't know. That's always been my take on it. And I think I really, it's something that I have spent decades thinking about at this point. So, and it's the only time I ever line up with the people who think that video game reviews should not have scores. There's certainly a crowd of people who believe that, and there are certainly sites out there that do that. I think that's fine. I don't think it's necessary. I think, you know, there should be a willingness to meet your audience halfway and give them some kind of at-a-glance thing that helps sum it up. If they're not going to have time to read the whole review, give them something useful that they can take away from them that still makes your review and your publication valuable. And, you know, having an overly a system with 1 billion half stars or half points or whatever. Like the more you do there, the less useful your system is, and so it just becomes a waste of time for everybody. So, yeah. Let's see. Maybe we can take one more here. All right. Mark from Virginia writes in and asks, should Microsoft have bought Valve? With everything when examining what Microsoft could or should have done over the years to repair the Xbox brand or prepare themselves for a future where they would be leaning more heavily on the PC, wasn't the obvious move always to just find a way to buy Valve? I'm curious if you ever heard chatter about Microsoft pursuing this, and if it ever could have realistically happened. I assume Gabe Newell would have wanted north of $100 billion for something like that for it to happen. But I think it would have been a much better use of money than buying Activision Blizzard, assuming Microsoft actually felt like throwing around that much money in their games division. Just curious for your thoughts and any insight you might have had into previous efforts or conversations that may have occurred to try to make this happen. I think Valve would be just too expensive, and also the whole foundation of Valve was them getting the fuck away from Microsoft. Now, a lot of years have passed, and eventually, Gabe Newell will want to retire. Some might say he already has. I don't know. He's on a boat all the time. But you will eventually have a situation where, like, the people that, and this happens with a lot of companies, right? Like, they run it, it's successful, but eventually they don't want to do it anymore for one reason or another, because they're old or dead or done, and so they eventually sell the thing. So I don't know. Like the long-term future of Valve, what happens 20 years down the line or whatever, like who the hell knows? But I think the antitrust stuff you saw with the Activision Blizzard purchase would have been multiplied times 100 trying to buy Valve. I don't think that Valve would integrate well into anything else that Microsoft is doing. And I think that Microsoft has shown that they are not good at doing this. And so I think, if we imagine some nightmare scenario where Microsoft could have acquired Valve, which I don't think the price would, make sense, because I don't think they're not in a position where they have to sell, right? So any asking price would be fucking astronomical on top of the actual value of the company. And I think that would be too much. I don't think Nadella would ever have gone for that the way he went for buying Call of Duty and, Candy Crush, right? So it's just sort of a situation that you just, like, it's already kind of impossible. Like, it just seems like a sort of thing that would have never happened. Did conversations ever happen? Probably not to any serious degree, but if there's one thing I've learned about this business, and I think it's true of all business, is that everyone is always talking to everybody about, what about this? What about this? Maybe we do something together like this. Is there something we could do here? I don't know. Is it maybe we buy you out? Maybe you buy us out. Like, I don't, I think that there's just sort of, and I also think that you probably have a sense of pride within Microsoft, where if you went to go buy Valve, you would probably have a contingent of people that would be like, we don't need to buy Valve. We have all that stuff already. We already have a game store. That would probably get in the way of that stuff. Yeah, I don't think that would be good for anybody. I don't think that would be good for you, the player. I don't think that would be good. I don't think that would integrate well into what Microsoft is doing. Because at the end of the day, I think if you integrated a bunch of Microsoft's stuff into Steam, it would probably ruin significant portions of Steam. The thing about Steam, the thing about Valve, but the thing about Steam specifically, I guess, is that there's nothing that they do that you couldn't do if you're Microsoft or you're Epic or you're anybody trying to build a PC storefront. There's nothing specifically about the way Steam conducts business that is impossible to duplicate. They have message boards. They have the ability to download games. They have the ability to buy games. They run sales sometimes. They have their refund policy. You know, there's the little kind of sugar on top stuff that is uniquely Valve's, like the trading card stuff and the badges and some of the other kind of social features that they've put into Steam to varying degrees of success. But you could build that. Like, if you gave me enough money and people that were smarter than me in terms of coding, like I could go to Epic and work on their storefront and, design and put features like that into their store. I just don't think it would matter. Partially because Valve already did it, but partially because Valve has the numbers. Valve has the player base. The thing that Valve really built that's of value is, and these days, probably more than ever, they have built a significant audience in Asia. Something like just over 50% of Steam users on a daily basis are coming from there. And so they've built up a massive worldwide audience for games. And I think if you bought it, the first thing you would do is inject a bunch of your shit into it and probably ruin it. You would integrate it in some weird ways. You would button up some parts of the business and fuck it up. Like, it's not to say that Steam is perfect, and I think that I look at Steam all the time and think like, man, I wish it did this, or if I was there, I'm trying to do this, and and maybe they have the reasons for not doing this stuff. But ultimately, I think it would be too expensive. I just don't think, because it would be hard to justify, because at the end of the day, you're buying players and hoping that they stay. And hoping that your presence doesn't drive them away. Now, there are fewer alternatives if you do buy them. And antitrust would have a field day with that aspect of it. And you wouldn't be able to bundle Steam with Windows, because they would, you would probably get antitrusted into a situation where you couldn't do that. And you would eventually, if you were to do that, you would eventually just turn it into the Xbox app. That's their Steam. They built the Xbox app. You can buy games in it. You can download it. You can play it. It has some social features. You have friends list. You can send messages. You can do, there's a lot of stuff you can do on the Microsoft platform. But I think Valve benefits also by being independent, and the vibes of Valve matter in a way that maybe they shouldn't, but they certainly do. And I think the minute you fuck that up, you would open the door for Epic. But the vibes there are not good. I don't know. I think a lot of that stuff wouldn't go, even if we were to try to entertain this, which I don't think it would work out, because I think the money would not make sense. You would buy a thing and it would probably not actually change your story that dramatically. You would not make that money back. Or if you did, it would take years and years and years. And by that time, all the money would have been blown on AI shit, and you'd be right back in the same hole. So I don't think that would have fixed Microsoft. I don't think that would fix anything about what they're doing. They already have a store. I got to go. Have a good time with the rest of your Tuesday. I'll be back Wednesday. We'll do some more stuff. And on Friday, of course, we will rank some more 64-bit video games. So be sure to come through for that. And have a good one. And I will see you next week.